Northwest Corridor in Pasadena. Del Mar, California, and Colorado are all too dangerous for bikers already, and Cordova and Green do not have a continuously marked bike lane. I am dismayed that there actually has been a plan this whole time, but it has just not been implemented yet. I hope that I will be able to use a union bike lane by the time I graduate in June 2023 next year. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, and we'll bring in Sonia Burnt as the final speaker on consent. Sonia, go ahead.
Good evening. I am deeply troubled by one of the requested amendments to the Capital Improvement Program budget, which is Agenda Item 5. During budget hearings last May, the police department reported publicly that it had $2.3 million in operating budget quote-unquote savings. Despite community pushback, this council approved PPD's request to use the $2.3 million excess general fund appropriation to remodel PPD's building and to replace its mobile command center. Last fall, staff requested no amendments to the CIP budget related to the PPD building remodel, and it was reported to be in the design phase. Significantly, the last annual comprehensive financial report notes an actual surplus of over $4.5 million in the PPD's general fund appropriations as compared to budget. Now, all of a sudden, you're being asked to unappropriate the $1 million in general fund appropriations for the remodel because there were no savings in the PPD's 2021 operating budget after all. $1 million might seem trivial to some, but it would pay for desperately needed community programs like our public health department's GEM program, which has just lost its grant funding. Respectfully, please investigate this financial matter and seriously consider an audit of the PPD's operating budget. Finally, please remember the documented $4.5 million in excess funding the PPD received for fiscal year 2021 when considering its proposed budget for fiscal year 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, is Jill Shook, item 10. Go ahead, Jill, 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful that we've come this far with the South Heritage Square, 69 units for homeless seniors. And I'm very grateful the city is interested in helping to get this final loan so we can start breaking ground in May. So again, thank you for the commitment you have to house our most vulnerable, and I just hope you fully support this. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That completes public comment on the consent. I do want to report out that the city clerk's office received 20 letters in support of item number 1, staff recommendation advocating for safer streets in the city and or providing comments on the matter. All the correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the record for item number 1. Thank you, Mayor. So we have a motion, a second. Do you want to do roll call?
Roll call, please.
Quickly, Mayor, just a moment.
Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor, I'll just take 30 seconds to piggyback on what esteemed leader in our community, Jill Shook, said in reference to Heritage Square Site 2. This is an extraordinary commitment by the council to build affordable housing, 69 units for the formerly homeless seniors and 1 unit for the project manager. I want to commend all of my colleagues and staff, as well as the developer, for staying true to really solving critical problems related to homelessness in the city of Pasadena. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Roll call.
So we have a motion and a second to approve all consent, including the council sitting as the 457 Deferred Compensation Plan trustees to approve their minutes. Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Thank you. That moves us to public hearings. Item 14 is the first public hearing.
Yes, Mayor, and item 14 is actually in conjunction with item 18, which is an ordinance. So they will both be, item 14 and 18 will be discussed concurrently. This is the time and place for the public hearing on approval of recommended water rate adjustments. On January 20th, 2022, the public hearing notice was published in the Pasadena Press and the Pasadena Journal. For item 14 and 18, the city clerk's office received 7 letters expressing concerns or in opposition to the staff recommendation and provided comments, and 4 letters advocating for the city to design and implement a citywide program for watering public trees to ensure that these trees are permanently placed on the city's watering schedule, and accountability and transparency from the Water and Power Department. Consider increasing water block tiers for larger lots, or expressing concerns with the inequity found in the city's current water billing system. The letters were distributed to the city council, posted online, and is part of the public hearing record for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This matter's a long time coming. I'll turn it over to the city manager and Mr. Keitlinger, who's here to present the matter.
I think we'll go straight to the general manager for water and power. We have a short PowerPoint that I believe is coming up, and would proceed.
Jeff, you're up.
I just wanted to introduce the item real quickly. I'll be happy to take questions along with Sherry Thomas. Assistant General Manager Sherry Thomas will cover the presentation. Just want to say, Mr. Mayor, Council, this has been a long time coming. We have been working on the rate structure. We have a lot of good maintenance to upkeep throughout the city of Pasadena. This past weekend, we actually had 4 to 5 breaks over the course of the city, all of them repaired, one of them being a 126-year-old pipe. So as you can see, there's a lot of maintenance and deferred maintenance we're doing, but we're working through it as fast as we can. And that's part of what this, primarily what this is for.
Great.
Sherry Thomas will now do the presentation. Thank you.
That's an old pipe. Ms. Thomas?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Wonderful to see some of you in person. Most of us in full face this time, so thank you very much. My name is Sherry Thomas. I'm the Assistant General Manager for the Water and Power Department. It's my pleasure this evening to present some information regarding the staff recommended water rate increases over the next 2 cycles, one effective on April 1st of 2022, and the second to become effective on January 1st of 2023. So the full staff recommendation. Thank you. So the staff recommendations this evening are to find that the rate recommendations are exempt from CEQA. And as I mentioned, there would be 2 rate increases effective April 1st that would affect the commodity charge component of the water rate and the distribution and customer charge, and then effective on January 1st of 2023, following on an increase to all 3 components of the water rate: the commodity charge, the distribution and customer charge, and the capital improvement charge. Excuse me, each of the staff recommendations is equivalent of approximately 7.1 and 7.2% of the system average rate. And the other item is I'm going to call it a housekeeping item, but is essentially a change in the language in the water rate ordinance that will eliminate reference to the water distribution system for the capital improvement charge and allow the revenues from that rate component to be applicable to all water system capital improvements. Next slide, please. So very quickly, as the City Council adopted the fiscal year 2022 budget in June of 2021. And at that time, there was some discussion about a probable rate increase in the range of about 3.5% to 3.7%. And subsequent to that, there were a number of fairly significant developments that led to the staff recommended increases that you are looking at today that are more in the 7% range rather than 3.7. The 2 most significant developments that occurred were the ongoing severity of the drought conditions that are facing California and all of the Western United States. And that prompted the Pasadena City Council to take an action in August to move to our level 2 water supply shortage plan. And that water supply shortage plan includes a recommended, voluntary for the moment, reduction in water consumption by Pasadena's customers of up to 15%, which is aligned with the state of California governor's recommendation to do the same statewide. So one of the major revisions that Pasadena's PWP staff went through was to revise the budget based on a significantly lower number of sales units than had originally been prepared for the 22 budget. The other development was the City Council adoption of the Water System and Resource Plan in October of 2021. That is a 20 to 25-year strategic plan that significantly increases the level of capital investment that the city will make in its water infrastructure. Very similar to what the general manager just mentioned. We are looking at components of the water distribution system that are 80, 100, 120 years old. All of those were considered as part of the water system and resource plan, and the significant increases in the investment that would take place.
Mayor,
especially
Sherry's
the first
dropping
5
in and
years.
out a little bit. I don't know if
Oh.
we can work on connectivity.
I can hold it. Oh, great. I'm going to try to do this a little bit better. Is that better, Vice Mayor Wilson? I heard
It is,
that's
thank you.
happening today too, so I know during the Finance Committee. So those were the significant impacts on what was originally the fiscal year 2022 budget. So primarily, we're looking at a reduced level of sales, which of course, because the city's water rates are over 60% volumetric, meaning they're charged on a per unit basis, a reduction in unit sales will automatically result in a significantly lower revenue stream. And at the very same time, looking at increasing the necessary investment in the infrastructure. So those two components had a major change in what the staff recommended rate change would be. A little bit less significant perhaps, but the budget preparation suggested that the rate increases would be effective in October of 2021. So that would leave about 3/4 of the year for the revenues to be collected, but that was postponed first to January out of consideration, of course, for the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on the Pasadena community. And then it was postponed once again to perform this updated analysis and come up with rate increases that were more aligned with what the new capital spending would be and the lower volume of unit sales. Next slide, please. So this is just a high-level view of the results of that analysis that staff performed. The results are shown here for the fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And I think it's quite evident that the revenues from the existing rate structure, existing rate levels are result in a net shortfall in funding for the planned expenditures. Fiscal year 2022, it's $11.5 million. And by 2023, it's over $14 million. And those shortfalls are only partially offset by the recommended rate increases for the City Council's consideration this evening. So we are expecting about $2.5 million from the first rate increase and about another 3.8 in the increase that would be effective on January 1st. And as you can see, there's still a variance. And the council and the community should be aware that that variance is actually part of the planned long-range financial structure. So it is not intended that today's ratepayers pay 100% of the cost to make capital investments. So the city and the water utility issue bonds, which we did in 2020 and 2021 to ensure that there was sufficient funding available to make some of those higher capital investments. So that variance that's shown here, even after the rate increases are put into place, should the City Council take that action this evening, would be offset by the use of those bond proceeds in both 2022 and 2023. There are reserves available specifically to offset some of the capital costs. We would draw $1 million in reserves for the current fiscal year, and that reserve would be about evened out by fiscal 2023 with the approval of the recommended increases. Next slide, please. So during several of the public meetings that we held leading up to tonight's public hearing, it's quite clear, and I think some of the comments that were submitted also, that this community has a great deal of interest and concern about the water use and availability of water supply. And so this slide has actually been presented to the City Council on a number of other occasions, but I find it quite useful. And I think it helped resonate with the community during our public discussions as well. So the time period covered here is about 70 years. And it is intended to show the year-over-year water consumption by Pasadena's customers beginning in 1952, and in this case, up through 2021. And so the green line at the top of the chart shows the change in population over that same 70-year period. So I think the simple takeaway is that while the population increased by over 30% during that 70-year timeframe, from roughly 125 to 130,000 people to more than 170,000 people served by the water system, remembering that about 15% of the water system customers are outside the city's city limits. So at the same time, the trend is clearly downward in terms of the total water sales for that same time period. So, that I think is a great response by the Pasadena water customers to the energy efficiency and conservation programs that were put in place. It clearly indicates that this community understands the value of water, and the expectation is that it will continue to make that observation and respond accordingly. So earlier I mentioned that the Water System and Resource Plan projects that there will be about a 15% reduction in sales. That would take place over the next 3 years. We are not anticipating that the entire reduction would take place in 1 year, but given the responsiveness of this community to the call for conservation in past years, it is expected that that would continue. Next slide, please. Just an overview of the water rate structure. As I mentioned, the city of Pasadena bills its water customers in what we call HCF, or 100 cubic feet. Sometimes that's also just simply called a billing unit. It is the equivalent of 748 gallons of water for each HCF. And today's rates that are currently in place, each billing unit or each 748 gallon increment costs roughly $5.89. And there are 3 separate components of the rate. And as I mentioned earlier, also about 60% plus of the rate is volumetric. That includes the capital improvement charge, or the blue section of this stack, and the yellow commodity section in the middle of this chart. So those two are both volumetric, meaning they're charged per 100 cubic foot or per billing unit. So any impacts in reduced sales reduces the revenue that's generated from each one of those rate components. And the distribution and customer charge, shown here at the bottom of this chart, is the only component of the rate that is fixed. And it is a fixed charge for each connection to the city's water system. And the rate for the distribution and customer charge varies for each customer depending on the size of their connection to the system. This has frequently been a source of some confusion. And in fact, I believe one of the comments that was submitted to the City Council referenced that this individual was not sure where to find the distribution and customer charge, their meter connection. I wanted to remind the community and the council that the meter connection size is shown on each customer bill. It is located, in fact, on the line that's labeled distribution and customer charge. And each customer should see their connection size, which might help them to understand a little better what the impacts of the rate proposals would be. So there was a lot of interest also in the community, and I'm sure by the City Council, about what the recommended rate increases would translate to for customer bills. So what we're showing here is the actual impact on our customers, primarily residential. So the meter sizes that are shown here in this chart are 3/4 inch and 1 inch. And that represents almost all of our residential customers. So about 90% or more of the customer base is served in these 2 categories of 3/4 inch and 1 inch meter connection size. So what we tried to show here is that usage of water consumption does make a difference. So even though the water rate structure that we have in place, is not as elegant as some might like it to be, it is actually driven so that customers who use more water pay more. So in this example, on the first set of charts, this is a 3/4 inch customer. Their usage is either 10 billing units or HCF or 20 HCF. And you can see that the current bill for a 10 HCF customer is $52.45. $93 for a customer using 20 HCF. And then for each of the recommended increases, the bill would change by $3.20 a month for the smaller user and $7.19 for the larger user. And the percentage is also higher for the higher user. And that's primarily because the inclined rate structure that is in place does pass on higher costs for customers who consume more water. And the chart on the second half of the page is similarly designed. It just shows the impact for a customer with a larger connection to the system, in this case, a 1-inch meter connection. So in each case, you can see that there is a variation. And if you look at both recommended increases, which is the columns on the far right, the total increase for the smaller user with the smaller meter is about 13%, and the larger user is almost 16%. So you can tell the variance there. That's based on the water consumed. Next page, please. Some more visually inclined, similar sort of story here. This again is a residential customer with a 3/4 inch meter connection. I think one of the easiest ways to look at this is think of these as 4 separate customers, all connected to the system with the same meter connection size of 3/4 inch. So the first stack or charts on the left side of this page shows what the rate impacts or bill impacts would be to a customer using 10 billing units a month. So it goes from $52.45 to $55.65 with the increase effective on April 1st, and then up to $59.32 for the second increase effective January 1st of 2023, for a combined increase of about 13% over those 2 recommended changes. Alternatively, on the far right of this chart shows the same meter connection size, same residential customer, this time using 30 HCF or 30 billing units instead of 10. And their current bill is $137.26. It goes to $148 with the increase effective on April 1st, and then $161 approximately with the increase on January 1st of 2023, for a combined increase of 17%. Again, the intent here is to show that there is indeed an impact for those customers with a higher water usage. Next page, please. So there was some interest expressed both by the community and I believe by council members about how does Pasadena compare to other water agencies, both currently and following the recommended rate increases, should that be the action of the council tonight. So what this shows is how Pasadena compares to a series of our neighboring agencies, also compares us to private water companies rather than public agencies. And Pasadena is represented here by the lighter blue color on the left side of each one of these charts. Again, it shows the current bill for a 3/4 inch connection using 10 HCF. So Pasadena right now is at $52.45. Glendale at $57.34, et cetera. And then it shows the same connection and usage after the first increase in April of 2022, and then the second increase in January of 2023. The one obvious in here is you can see there's quite a variance. And there's a number of factors in that. And the real fallout there is Riverside. So Riverside shows as significantly and consistently low. And Riverside is, their water supply is 100% groundwater. So unlike Pasadena, where about 35 to 40% of our water is groundwater, but 60 to 65% is purchased from the Metropolitan Water District, Riverside has 100% groundwater. So their rates will always be lower, their bills will always be lower. They are also a 100-plus-year-old water utility. They purchased water rights to aquifers underneath San Bernardino well over many, many decades ago. And so their rights to that water are similar to what we have with the Raymond Basin, but they receive 100% of their supply. So they will consistently have rates that are lower. So, but it also, every agency that we've talked to, their level of investment in their infrastructure is different. Even the customer base is different. Pasadena is about 70+% residential, our customer base. It costs more to serve residential customers. quite simply because there's just more connections to the system to maintain. If you're a community like Vernon or a large industrial city, there's fewer connections, and it just costs less money to maintain the system in those cases. So there's a number of factors that go into this, but the water supply, of course, is the dominant driver. Next, please. So there, I mentioned earlier, a number of activities that have taken place in the community leading up to this public hearing tonight. So the notice that was mailed to our customers immediately following the City Council's approval of this date as the public hearing date. In the interim, we did have a number of meetings. I want to thank especially the district liaisons for taking time from their schedules to meet specifically about this item. We also conducted 3 general public meetings, one of them virtual, 2 of them in person. One of them was recorded for broadcast on KPAS. We also had a separate discussion with the key accounts for the Water and Power Department. These are primarily the larger consumers of both electricity and water. They are mostly commercial customers. They also had a separate discussion with the department about the recommended increases. And of course, we had multiple outreach through social media, through the city manager's newsletter, and thank you also to Pasadena Now, which took time to cover several of the public events that were held. So at the conclusion of this public hearing and pending City Council action, as I mentioned, in the first reading of the ordinance change, the first rate increase would take effect on April 1st of this year, 2022, with a second to be effective on January 1st of 2023. Next slide, please. And that concludes the formal presentation for this evening. These are, again, the staff recommendations for the City Council's consideration, and we are certainly available to answer any questions of the council.
Thank you. Very thorough presentation. And, again, highlights that as we do our part to conserve, the fact that our billing is volumetric comes back to cost us more, but those costs to maintain the infrastructure are they're baked in, and we have to maintain the infrastructure. Mr. Kennedy, followed by Mr. Masuda, Mr. Hampton, and then Mr. Wilson. Oh, Ms. Williams. Oh, and we'll amend that to say Mr. Kennedy, followed by Ms. Williams, Mr. Masuda, Mr. Hampton, and Mr. Wilson.
First, I'd like to ask Mayor, how many speaker cards do we have?
There are currently 4 speakers in the queue for this item, although 2 have not checked in.
So there are 2 speaker cards, Mayor. Is it possible we could hear from the 2 speakers before I make my comments?
Yeah, let's ask our questions first, Mr. Kennedy, and then,
Okay.
yeah, and then we'll turn to the public.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I would like to say to staff, thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful that at the outset on slide 6 that you shared the 3 components of Pasadena's water rate. PW staff have shared that the current ordinance is not explicit about capital costs of water supply. For example, new wells, spreading basins, groundwater treatment are to be assigned to the rates. It appears that the ordinance or the proposed ordinance, that the current ordinance is clear that water supply, including capital costs, must be paid out of the commodity charge, and PWP believes that it must be assigned to CIC. So I'd like staff to share with the council how it seeks to resolve that, because it appears that staff is simply saying, let's change the ordinance to the view of staff's view, excuse me.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Kennedy. The definition of the rate components in the water ordinance clearly state that the commodity component of the rate is intended to provide funding for the water that is purchased from Metropolitan Water District and the costs for Pasadena to extract water from the ground. The capital costs associated with any of its infrastructure, including wells and including those structures attached to the wells, are paid for from the capital improvement charge. So if I'm understanding, and I think I know the reference that you're referring to, if we were to put the costs of capital for our groundwater extraction into the commodity rate, that would obviously require significant change in the definition of those charges through the city council, but it would also increase the costs of our groundwater extraction very significantly. So the costs for the groundwater right now are only the water. It's the water itself that we pump and the cost to extract it, not the wells and not the infrastructure that makes that happen. So for lack of a better description, the commodity charge is the wet stuff. It's the water that we buy and the water that we produce, not the actual mechanisms to do so. So if we were to shift some of the capital costs to the commodity charge, that would be an entire revamping of the water structure and would significantly increase the costs for Block 1 water, which is right now the lowest cost water because it reflects only the groundwater that we pull from our local supply.
So thank you for that. I and other council members during the water resource system and resource plan discussions strongly supported the adoption of budget-based pricing and future rate proceedings to encourage water conservation, and TWP staff agreed to consider that. Is it true that BBP will only be applied to the commodity charge elements and the DNC and the CIC will not be affected by BBP? Boy, false.
So I'm going to interpret that as budget-based pricing.
Correct.
Okay, so I think I believe that all components of the water rates will be affected by the implementation of budget-based pricing. So to your point, Councilmember Kennedy, yes, staff did commit to doing a cost of service study and developing models for budget-based pricing. That is still in the work plan for fiscal year 2023. It is a very significant undertaking, and it would require us to analyze and revisit costs for all different components, including the commodity, the distribution and customer, and the capital improvement charge. So each of those components is likely to be affected by the rate analysis for budget-based pricing.
And if council approves the requested action or recommendations, are we not undercutting the conservation message built into budget-based pricing?
So the recommended rate changes for this evening are intended to recover, costs that are currently incurred. So the rate recommendations are necessary in order for us to balance the budget for the water system and to make the improvements to that water infrastructure that this city council has already approved, especially in the water system and resource plan. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Council.
No, go ahead, I apologize.
Oh, so the recommended rate actions will increase the costs for each of the blocks, so that will further encourage conservation. And again, this is a action that would be superseded should the council decide to take action on a commodity or budget-based pricing. This does not undermine that, nor in any way take away the staff's commitment to taking that action.
So your testimony is that it would in no way negatively impact the council's desire related to budget-based pricing. Would that be an accurate way to encapsulate in a nutshell what you just said?
Yes, sir, that is accurate.
Thank you very much, Sherry Thomas. I appreciated that, all your responses. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Ms. Williams, followed by Mr. Masuda, then Mr. Hampton.
Thank you. Just had just three questions, and I think one may have been attempted during the BBT discussion. Okay, so the block rate structure, you saw the public comment that we got in terms of the sort of larger lot sizes and the need to manage fire risk and other things. So that was of concern to me, and just wanted to get an update on sort of what our process is with the new customer management system and the ability to reform our rate structure so it is a little bit more equitable. So that's the first question. The second question is just the history and projected MWD rates. There was a question that we got on that. What is the imported water costing us, and what will it cost us in the future? And the last one is our current water conservation efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. So yes, so we are just 3 weeks away now, finally, from going live with our new customer information system. So we're very much looking forward to that for a lot of reasons. But that system does in fact have special design that will allow us to implement much more complex rate structures, including a budget-based water rate design. So that is, in fact, one of the reasons why it hasn't been implemented so far, is we just haven't had the structure in place to do that. So that will be a part of what goes into our cost of service analysis. That new system will allow us to test different scenarios, such as those that were described with the larger lot sizes and with those that may find themselves, in fact, in a high fire threat area. All of those components can be a part of the inputs into a more complex structure with the new CIS. So yeah, the MWD rates, in fact, the recommended increases to the commodity rate are specifically to offset mostly the increased charges from the Metropolitan Water District, and also some increased costs to produce our local water. So right now we are, the commodity increases that are recommended would cover the increases to Metropolitan Water District already approved and in place through January of 2022, and also include some estimates going forward for rate increases from Metropolitan in fiscal years 23 and 24. So they have not yet taken action as a board on the increases for January of 23 and 24. So what is being discussed is actually a higher proposal than what is included in Pasadena's estimated costs at this time. But our cost projections do include an increase from Metropolitan as well. And then, I'm sorry.
And what have MWD's rate increases been just for the past couple of years, just so
Right.
we know?
So they are ranging anywhere from 3 to 5% each year. And that is the same projected increases that we have included in our budget going forward. But as I mentioned, at this point, there's some consideration of perhaps even higher increases than what we have included in our budget, especially for Tier 1 treated water, which is the water that Pasadena takes from Metropolitan Water District. And with regard to conservation efforts, we are very actively pursuing a number of additional programs, including our participation in turf replacement. We are going to look at matching some of Metropolitan's subsidy for those turf replacement programs. We will continue to encourage, through rebate programs, investment in low flow everything. There's a lot of that already in place, so we're looking always for other options to increase that, and also looking at ways to capture stormwater locally on site through rain barrels and swales and other programs that we can help our customers with by augmenting some of their investment.
I was looking at the percentage of conservation compared to this. The state required us to reduce by 15%. How much did we reduce by? And that was a big public question. The more we reduce, the more we get charged.
Yeah, that's the,
so what have our percentages been?
So we are right now reducing about 3 to 4% so far year to date in fiscal year 2022. Remember that the council adopted that in August of 21. So it took some time for us to implement programs. So when we look at our actual volume sales, through February and into March, we are seeing a decrease. As I mentioned, we don't expect that 15% decrease to happen all at once. We are predicting that it will take place over about a 3-year time period, but we are seeing about a 3 to 4% reduction so far during this fiscal year.
Mayor, before you call, was that your third? Before you call on the next person, I might just add that the general manager of the Metropolitan Water District is asking for an 8% increase. And actually, the department is helping me and put together a letter so we can document that we think 5 would be a number that would be more equitable for small agencies such as ourselves. And as I've talked to other directors, there certainly are others that are very concerned about that,
Wow.
particularly since a lot of the increases that we're seeing in the budget are new administrative positions. And it's just a tough thing to do right now where we find ourselves in a drought.
That's a big hit. Were you finished, Ms. Williams? Mr. Masuda, followed by Mr. Hampton, and then Vice Mayor Wilson.
Mayor, Mr. Hampton was before me.
Okay.
Mayor, it's totally fine. I can go after all the comments. I'm sorry, I can go after public comments.
Okay, Mr. Masuda?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Sherry, thank you so much for the report. And I want to thank you for having all those community meetings. It was so, I think that was great. What comes out a lot is that our infrastructure is 80 to 100 years old. And you mentioned today about our wells being repaired as part of the plan. What about our reservoirs?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Masuda. Yes, certainly the reservoirs and all the infrastructure surrounding the reservoirs are a part of the water system and resource plan that the City Council approved in October of 2021. And in fact, one of the most significant of the projects in the entire plan is the replacement of the Sunset Reservoir Complex, which is located, of course, on Mountain Street. So that is probably one of the single largest capital investments in the water infrastructure. And it is one where, so we have 2 reservoirs there, ranging in age from 100 to 120 years. And so that is very, very much not only a significant priority, but a significant amount of the monetary investment.
Thank you, Sherry, and I look forward to hearing the other public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Masuda. Vice Mayor Wilson?
I can keep this super short because my colleagues actually asked a number of the questions about mostly what the MET increase was, and that sets the baseline since most of our water is imported and MET's raising their rates. By definition, we have to pass those rate increases through as well. Sherry, I just wanted to clarify, I know our billing system delivers bills every 2 months. The analysis you showed, I think, was the monthly cost to an average user. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so different than what people would see, they'd have to multiply that by 2 since they're used to seeing kind of 2 months of billing units. Okay, no, I think super important to echo, I think what Gene was saying as well, in terms of investing in a very old infrastructure, critical that we turn the valve or turn the faucet and the water comes out. So eager to see what the public comment is as well.
Okay, I think that completes people in the queue. Let's go to public comment.
So Charlie Barakat and Elizabeth Hammond are not checked in. So we'll call David Cutter and then Ken Kuehls. And this is for item 14 and 18 concurrently.
Mr. Cutter?
Mr. Cutter, if you can unmute your display. It's not a *6 because he's on the
Unmute.
There you go. We can hear you now. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Awesome. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm speaking tonight about the proposed change to the text of the water ordinance I urge you to send the strongest water conservation signals you can as our current drought worsens. Adoption of the budget-based pricing that has been discussed and hopefully will happen will go a long way towards sending those customers, our customers, those needed conservation signals. So I think that's important. I hope you agree. But budget-based pricing is only going to be applied to the commodity charge, to my understanding. And if the ordinance is changed so that the water supply, including the capital cost, is assigned to the capital improvement charge, then budget-based pricing and its strong conservation signal is going to be diluted. And again, that's because budget-based pricing will only be applied to the commodity charge. So I urge the council to keep the water ordinance text as it is so that we send the strongest conservation signal. Please keep the text as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Ken Kuehls for item 14 and 18 concurrently. Mr. Kuehls,
There we go.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
we
Go
go.
ahead. Yeah.
I'll try to make it fast. PWP told the Municipal Services Committee that the proposed ordinance language redefining the capital improvement charge is a clarification when in truth it's establishing a new policy that's contrary to the existing ordinance requirement that the commodity rates be used to recover water supply costs. Council members frequently want to know how Pasadena's water rates compare with other similar water utilities. What you should know is that the policy for the vast majority of public water agencies throughout the state, including Los Angeles, Burbank, and Glendale, is to include all costs for water supply in their commodity rates, and the PWP proposal would make this city an outlier. I chuckled when I read the assertion on page 7 of the agenda report that the actions support city council policy goals to increase conservation. As I explained in my written comments, this policy change will actually reduce the conservation signal in the commodity rates. I have to disagree with Ms. Thomas's response to Councilmember Kennedy's question regarding budget-based pricing impact on the rates. The budget-based pricing structure only works for increasing block volumetric charges, and that would affect the commodity charge only, since the CIC is a fixed volumetric rate and the DNC is a fixed rate. I wish I could tell you that there are technical reasons or legal constraints driving whether or not you should adopt the proposed ordinance change, but there aren't. PWP will collect the necessary revenues to offset costs as permitted by Prop 218, regardless of your decision, and there's no threat to the bond ratings. What you simply have before you is a discretionary and binary choice to either weaken or strengthen Pasadena's conservation ethics as a matter of city council policy.
Mr. Kuehls, your time has expired.
I have a question for the speaker, please.
Okay.
Can you be more specific how you believe, Mr. Kuehls, that it's weakening? You keep using the term it's weakening our position. I'm not clear as one council member exactly what you mean if we were to move forward with the proposed recommendation by staff.
So simply, as Ms. Thomas said, if you applied the capital cost to the commodity charge, it would increase the commodity charge. If you increase the commodity charge, you increase the impact of budget-based pricing on and its conservation signal. To the extent that you do not apply it to the commodity charge, you weaken the signal.
So is your suggestion for council's consideration that we not modify the language?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I have a question, Mayor, for Ms. Thomas at an appropriate time before we vote on anything.
Yes.
That completes public comment based on those that have submitted speaker cards and are in the meeting.
Is there a response, Ms. Thomas? Jeff?
Yeah, I would like to clarify that the recommendation to change the language in the ordinance is really quite simple. The capital improvement charge was first designed when the city council adopted the original water master plan in 2002. And it specifically says that the capital improvement charge shall apply to the water distribution system. It uses the word distribution. What the recommendation is to remove the word distribution and just have the capital improvement charge and the associated revenues be applicable to all capital projects in the water system. It's just a clarification. It doesn't change the designation of a commodity to a capital or vice versa. It just simplifies the definition of what projects the capital improvement charge revenues can be applied to.
A little more clarity than maybe leaving the word distribution might cause people to believe.
Right.
Okay. Good answer. Mr. Kennedy, did you have a question?
No, Mayor, I think that the way in which you proceeded is fine. I just want to make sure that Shari Thomas, for the record, as the Deputy General Manager, understands that I'm just trying to get at the accuracy of a way forward in terms of the modifications that are being sought in the recommendations in the staff report. Want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to represent
Thank you.
our ratepayers and those who rely on the council for accurate information. So thank you very much. And I hope that you will continue your conversation and dialogue with the speakers that came before from the public. And I appreciate the fact that you have engaged.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I'm going to remind us that this is just the first of 4 public hearings on our agenda this evening. Okay, I think that, Mr. Hampton is back in the queue.
Thank you. I'd like the motion to close the public hearing and then I'll follow up.
Moved and is it seconded? Did somebody second that?
I'll second.
Seconded. Roll call on the closing of the public hearing.
Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes?
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The public hearing is closed.
Okay.
Now, Mayor, thank you, everyone for their questions. Those questions were really helpful for me. This has come through MSC and Vice Mayor Wilson, Mr. Chair. Sherry, I want to just thank you for the presentation. It was extremely thorough and it was a great understanding of our water system. Now, the question that is always asked me, and I'll ask the same question I asked MSC is, well, I'm using less water and now you're charging me more. I understand that, the state of California is in a drought and, if we had lots of water, maybe the prices weren't so high from MWD. But what is our response to that? I mean, I don't feel like that was really brought up it was brought up in some of the questions, but there wasn't really a response from PWP, if there is one.
Yeah, so Councilmember Hampton, it's a great question and obviously one we have struggled to answer. For many years, having a volumetric water rate structure was considered a best practice. And in fact, while water sales were stable or increasing, it allowed the agencies to send a message. By having inclining block rates the way we have, we maintained a steady revenue stream. And having even at one point in time, it was recommended that at least 2/3 of the water rate structure should be volumetric. So, the revenue stream created by that at one time was dependable, and it allowed us to continue to make necessary investments. So in the last 10 years or so, as we've promoted conservation, and in fact have had to, and it's the right thing to do because of the scarcity of the commodity, the natural outcome of having such a heavily volumetric rate structure is that the significant impact on revenues impacts the amount that we have available to make investments in the system. So, it's a conundrum for people to say, I'm doing what you're asking me to do and use less water, but my rates are going up. So the
Right.
the offset is that customers do still have, some control over their bills. So even as the rates go up, if they continue to conserve, their overall bill amount will go down. So, it's not a perfect solution. And dare I say that a budget-based rate design would experience some of the same challenges because the water supply is very much challenged and the cost for that water supply will continue to increase. And so, there's no perfect solution to it. But, in order for us to maintain sufficient revenues to meet our requirements for investment and ensure that reliable, sustainable supply is available, this is what's necessary. And that 2/3 or 60% volumetric rate structure is what causes that issue.
If I could add just a little bit to that, most of our costs, our fixed costs, we don't have less pipes to maintain. We don't have less reservoirs to maintain. They continue to get older. They continue to need more attention. So every unit of water we sell that has to carry a percentage of that fixed cost. And as we sell less units, the cost to each unit goes up. It's the old dilemma of fixed costs versus variable cost. And utility systems, we see the same thing in power. Utility systems have huge fixed overhead, and when the cost that we're charging is not fixed, but is volumetric in this case, it just means that we add more to each unit to maintain those fixed costs. I don't know if that helps, but I always like to think about it in
I think
the fixed costs don't go down. Sorry.
No, I think that those answers are very helpful, coming from you, City Manager, as well as you, Sherry. Thank you so much for answering that question. I think there's one piece that is always kind of left out. It is, in comparison to our neighboring cities, as you mentioned in your slide, our rates are very comparable, if not, we're doing much better than them. But performance-wise, I mean, we have a fantastic team. We have a team that walks up and down streets and looks for leaks to help our residents out and different things. And, fixing sprinkler heads, all types of things. I think that those things are missing in the whole package deal. And I understand, there's going to be rising costs just like with anything in this world, right? Bread was at, 10 cents a loaf at some point. I never saw that, but, now it's, between $3 and $6. So I understand that price go up. It's just, the nature, but I think that our prices have gone up, but our services have not diminished. And I think that is a piece that, the department needs to really advertise more when talking about our water rates. We need to talk about all of the services that we have that other cities don't have, not just our actual rate. That's just food for thought moving forward. And I'm sure this will not be the first or last. I mean, this is not the first, but I'm sure that this will not be the last water rate increase I will see in my lifetime living in Pasadena. Then to my other question is the same question I asked in MSC. And I think Councilmember Kennedy asked a similar question as well as Councilmember Williams. Our water rates. I think a resident that has a 1-inch pipe or a 3/4 of an inch pipe, I think it's not fair if my next door neighbor is using less water than me, but spending more on their water bill, and they can't change that. So I could see if you said, oh, Tyrone, we could actually make that change and change the pipe size going into their home. But unless that can happen, I mean, from my understanding, every time I've always asked this question, that's not an option. You can't change that you have a 1-inch pipe coming into your home. Is that not correct?
So there are limited options for customers who want to have a discussion about changing the size of their water connection. I would remind the Councilmember Hampton that the entire system is designed so that the size of your connection is intended to reflect the capacity of water that could be delivered to any home, which is why typically, not always, but typically larger property sizes have a larger meter connection size. And the entire distribution system is designed to be able to supply the maximum water demand to any property at any time. So, we don't recommend a wholesale change out in meter connection sizes for a large number of customers, primarily because the system is designed to deliver water at the meter connection size to that property. So I understand exactly what you're saying. I have a neighborhood where, I have an 1.5 inch connection to Pasadena's water system. My next door neighbor with a property that's even larger than mine has a 1-inch connection. So he has a great time with me because I pay more in fixed charges than he does. But the water that, the amount of water allocated in each block is different. So we go, round and round about that. The system and the rate design is set so that it's intended to provide you with the maximum demand for any given property. So if there is a customer who really wants to talk about reducing their connection to the city, you certainly can refer them to the department, and we can look at the individual aspects of that customer's connection.
Okay, thank you for that information. That's changed since the last time I asked this question and had a couple of residents that were interested in doing that. So I will follow up with them and see if it's still an interest of theirs. And so thank you, Sherry, for that information. I do think that, moving forward, as mentioned, you're looking at studying this, that everyone's rate, especially residentially, commercially could be completely different. But especially residentially, the rates should be based on the usage of water, not because I have a bigger pipe that comes to my home. So I think that that's the best approach. I understand that our system is not built that way, and I know that we have opportunity to look at making some similar changes so that we can get close to that. But that's an ideal goal of mine, and I think of the residents that live in my district that have 1 inch or 1.5 inch pipes that are coming to their home, and they're paying significantly more than everyone else. Sherry, thank you for the time. Mayor, council, thank you for letting me ask all these questions. And at the end, and I'd like to move approval of the rate increase.
Thank you. Is there a second? Vice Mayor Wilson?
I'll second that, and I also just had one comment
Oh,
to
sure. Go
follow
ahead.
on to Councilmember Hampton's. I think the elephant in the room is the state mandates for water reduction as well as the state mandates for development. We did get a lot of letters complaining about new development and sort of the spreading out of the different burdens of the infrastructure cost. Quite frankly, one person recommended to me that the state should actually just give everybody a rebate because of the water rate increases. I think that would be a great idea if anyone wants to advocate for that. But it's a very awkward and uncomfortable thing that we are kind of forced to do these things by the state, and then our residents and customers and commercial entities end up picking up the burden for our state's awkward water structure and uneven distribution of water resources. So that's really unfortunate. I'm going to support this rate increase, but if there's a way we can try to address that in the future, I would be supportive of that. Thanks.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Roll call.
To approve the staff recommendation, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes?
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Thank you, everyone. Very good work. One quick question, Sherry. The population numbers for water delivery is different than the city's population number, different from the PUSD population number. Can you just briefly explain that we serve people beyond the city and where we do that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, approximately 13 to 15% of Pasadena's water customers are outside the city limits. They are primary in the Altadena region and in the southeast portion of Pasadena in the Chapman Woods area. So those are areas that were added to the city's water service, many decades ago. But that means the water service population is just over 170,000 compared to the resident population of Pasadena.
Of about 137,000.
139,255 to be exact.
Thank you.
That would be perfect.
I just did redistricting. That's all.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, we have first reading or introduction of the
Mayor,
related
I'll do it.
ordinance. Who said that? Vice Mayor Wilson?
Mayor, I know, Councilman Hampton wants to offer that. I did also just want to chime in. I think the water rates is a very complicated topic between the various rate structures, the moving elements, commodity costs, and I think Sherry and the team did an excellent job of conveying what needed to be conveyed in a topic that you can get really confused by. So I wanted to congratulate the staff for helping navigate MSC and the public through that before we move on the ordinance.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Great work.
So this is offered by Councilmember Hampton, an ordinance of the City of Pasadena, California, amending the water rate ordinance, Title 13, Chapter 13.20 of the Pasadena Municipal Code. And again, offered by Councilmember Hampton. Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The ordinance has been conducted for first reading. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the
Thank you.
council.
Thank you for the work. Next public hearing is a quasi-judicial action, and it's an appeal of a planning commission decision on a conditional use permit for commercial cannabis. Why don't we, before we open the public hearing, the city manager has a statement.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to item 15, my husband had prior involvement with Sweet Flower. That is the applicant in the hearing you're about to proceed into. The lawyers have reviewed the facts, and based on legal advice received, it's been determined that I do not have a conflict of interest related to this matter. However, to avoid any appearance of a conflict related to Sweet Flower, I am abstaining from involvement regarding this matter, and Assistant City Manager Nick Rodriguez will represent the City Manager's office in the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we can open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the time and place for the public hearing on a quasi-judicial action appeal planning commission decision on conditional use permit 6921 for the approval of the commercial cannabis retailer at 827 East Colorado Boulevard, submitted by Integral Associates Dina LLC and Harvest of Pasadena LLC. Sorry. No publishing was required for this public hearing. However, the public hearing notice was mailed and posted on February 28th, 2022. The city clerk's office received one letter in opposition to the approval of the conditional use permit application until an environmental review of potential cumulative impacts is conducted, and one quote declaration expressing concerns with traffic flow issues likely to be caused by approving the staff recommendation. Those two letters were distributed to the council, posted online as part of the record for this item. Mayor and City Council, just to go over the process for this public hearing with the applicant and appellant, we will first hear from staff, the staff presentation. Then the City Council can ask questions of staff. Then the applicant will have a 7 to 10 minute presentation followed by City Council questions. Then the appellant will have a 7 to 10 minute presentation followed by City Council questions. Then if there's any public comment from members of the public, and then followed by a rebuttal by the appellant and then the applicant, each up to no more than 3 minutes, and then close the public hearing, and the council can then do their deliberations. So I just wanted to lay that out as we move forward.
Thank you. So why don't we go ahead and get started?
Mayor, thank you very much. Just very briefly, this is just a conditional use permit that was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. There was an appeal filed. I'll remind the City Council that the number of retail establishments has been set by both the voters and the council and capped at 6. So there are a maximum of 6 in terms of cumulative impacts. What we're talking about really are a max of 6 in the city. And the location of each one of these has been also set by ordinance in terms of the zones that they can be located in and their distance separation requirements from other potentially sensitive uses. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Guille Nunez, our project manager.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council persons. The item before you tonight is the appeal of Planning Commission decision of a conditional use permit number 6921 for approval of a commercial cannabis retailer at 827 East Colorado Boulevard. This conditional use permit is a request for approval of a 1,414 square foot retail cannabis dispensary within an existing 3,200 square foot building. Interior tenant improvements and minor exterior alterations are proposed. No new square footage is proposed. This conditional use permit was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission on January 12, 2022 at a notice public hearing. And this here is an elevation of the proposed facade for Sweet Flowers dispensary. Oh, okay. Sorry. I do. I was trying to figure out, I'm sorry. Sure. An appeal of Planning Commission approval of conditional use permit 6921 was submitted on January 24th, 2022. Appellants of this, the appellants are 2 of the existing cannabis operators currently operating in the city, and they are Integral Associates Dina, LLC, and Harvest of Pasadena, LLC. Integral Associates Dina, LLC is currently operating as Essence at 908 East Colorado Boulevard. Harvest of Pasadena is currently operating at 169 West Colorado Boulevard. The appellant cite 5 reasons for their appeal addressing CEQA and CUP findings. So their second statement in their appeal is that the Planning Commission erred in the CEQA determination for the conditional use permit. The 2 exemptions that were approved by the Planning Commission for conditional use permit 6921 were Class 1 for existing structures and Class 3 for conversion of small structures. The property does exist of an existing facility, and it does qualify for both Class 1 and Class 3 categorical exemptions. The appellants state that these exemptions do not apply because cannabis retail sales is not an existing use and thus should only apply to a project that involves negligible or no expansion of an existing use. Citing various Supreme Court decisions, the appellants state that allowing up to 3 dispensaries in a council district and in closer proximity to one another than 1,000 feet inevitably creates significant environmental impacts, including increased traffic from customers driving to new dispensaries, increased noise, and change patterns of urban development in the city. However, the property does consist of an existing facility, which is a single-story commercial building, which was constructed in 1923 and which has been used for various commercial uses, including retail sales, restaurants, and service uses. There are no expansions proposed because the property is an existing facility with only negligible improvements proposed, and it has previously been used for various retail uses in the past. Therefore, it qualifies for both the Class 1 and Class 3 categorical exemptions. Statement 3 of the appeal is that findings 4 and 5 cannot be made because no environmental review of likely impact of likely traffic, noise, or other environmental impacts was conducted. The Planning Commission found that all of the required conditional use findings can be made. A full analysis of the findings is in attachment A to the staff report. The project does qualify for both Class 1 and Class 3 categorical exemptions, and such technical studies to determine traffic, noise, and other environmental impacts are not required. Again, this is a retail use in an existing tenant space that has been used for retail uses and other commercial activities. With no exterior alterations, only minor tenant improvements are proposed. Statement 4 in the appellant's appeal is that finding 3 cannot be made because it is not consistent with General Plan Policy 3.1. General Plan Policy 3.1 states, avoid the concentration of uses and facilities in any neighborhood or district where their intensities, operations, and/or traffic could adversely impact the character, safety, health, and quality of life. The Planning Commission found that all of the required conditional use permit findings can be made. You can refer to attachment A for a full analysis of the findings. The project is a cannabis retail use which complies with all distance separation requirements to sensitive receptors that is listed in the municipal code. The location requirement in the city's ordinance are above and beyond the state's location requirements. Statement 5 in the appellant's appeal is that there is an inconsistency between the general plan and the current central district specific plan, in that the general plan has changed all of the zoning districts in the central district, but the central district specific plan has not been updated. The city's general plan was last updated in 2015. There are no inconsistencies in the current or proposed central district specific plan that would preclude the proposed retail sales of cannabis. The project would establish a retail use in an area identified by the general plan for retail uses and specifically meets the location requirements established by the voters of Pasadena. Sweet Flower's proposed location at 827 East Colorado Boulevard is within Central District 5 zoning district. Retail sales are allowed and are proposed to continue to be allowed. The recommendation by staff, the application submitted by Sweet Flower is fully compliant with all of the land use regulations contained in section 17.50.066 of the municipal code. It is also consistent with the general plan and with the central district specific plan. In addition to this conditional use permit, the applicant must also receive approval of a city-issued cannabis permit and a state license prior to operating. There are a number of additional regulations contained in Title V and Title VIII that are imposed as part of the cannabis permit, and the applicant must maintain a valid state license at all times. Based on the fact that the proposed location meets all applicable requirements of the zoning code, staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit number 6921, subject to the findings contained in attachment A and conditions of approval in attachment B. This concludes my report. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mayor, for the record, I just wanted to state that both the conditional use permit findings and the CEQA exemptions are the same ones that the appellants relied upon for their approvals.
Thank you. So next we'll hear from members of the council. Are there any questions before we proceed to the applicant's presentation? Mr. Kennedy's hand's up. Questions, Mr. Kennedy?
Mayor, I think for me, I would like to hear both sides before I make any comment.
Okay, so let's move on to the applicant.
Mr. Dodd will bring in first as the applicant. Tim? There you go. We can't hear you. Are you there? Can you hear us? Sorry, Mr. Dodd. For some reason, you're not being heard here in the chamber. We can't hear you.
Mr. Dodd, if you'll, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Are you able to unmute? Mr. Dodd,
I think maybe if you take it off your earphones and use your computer speakers, maybe? I don't know.
Is there a way you can call him or? I mean, he can call him, yes, and change his audio. Call in.
Todd, Tim, are you able to speak now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can hear you. Go ahead. You are,
I'm so sorry about that.
that's okay.
Good evening, Mayor Gordo, Vice Mayor Wilson, council members and staff. It is my privilege to appear before you this evening to offer my brief comments. In the interest of time, I know that you have a very full agenda tonight. I've also provided to the city, but do not intend to present tonight, a redacted version of the original Planning Commission presentation I made on January 12th of this year, which was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. I would be happy to address any questions you may have on our operation, our experience, our track record, or our location, should you wish. Turning to tonight's appeal of our validly issued CUP, as background, Sweet Flower was an original applicant in a process that started on January 1 of 2019, over 3 years ago. We were selected as one of the 6 winning applicants in the city of Pasadena on June 5, 2019. We were unanimously granted a conditional use permit by the Planning Commission on January 12, 2022, the only cannabis operator in the city of Pasadena to receive unanimous approval. In voting in favor of Sweet Flower's CUP, the chair of the Planning Commission, Mr. Olivas, who also represents our district, District 3, commented on our best-in-class diversity, inclusivity, and social equity initiatives. There is no dispute that both our location and our operation comply with Pasadena law. Sole contention of the appellants appears to be that the city, the staff, and the Planning Commission all erred in correctly determining that our CUP is exempt from environmental review under CEQA. For all of the reasons very well expressed in the staff report and in the staff presentation this evening, it is clear that the city's, staff, and the Planning Commission's determination regarding CEQA is correct and should stand. A vote against our CUP and in favor of this appeal would overturn a validly issued and unanimously approved CUP. It would have the effect of nullifying an ordinance of the city of Pasadena that was validly enacted by this council. It would invalidate the hard work of this council and EdTech in building a working cannabis program and to advance social equity in Pasadena, and would only support appellant's efforts, in my view, to further suppress competition, legal and local competition in Pasadena. Sweet Flower has worked extensively with the Pasadena Community Coalition, the only operator to do so, to provide jobs in the cannabis industry to Pasadena residents, to host now multiple job fairs in Pasadena for Pasadena residents, to provide representation at all of our stores for African-American-led Pasadena cannabis brands, to fund expungement clinics in Pasadena for those impacted by the war on drugs, and to provide mentoring and representation to cannabis entrepreneurs of color in Pasadena. Sweet Flower has done this while not yet being able to open. We seek only to get open as soon as possible and to do more in Pasadena. I urge you to reject this appeal, to affirm the city's determination regarding CEQA, and affirm the unanimous decision of the Planning Commission to issue Sweet Flower a valid CUP. And I urge you to do so urgently this evening so that we can continue our good work in the city of Pasadena. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. Next, we'll hear from, actually, other questions for Mr. Dodd before we, no, okay. Next, we'll hear from members of the public.
The appellant. So I believe Richard McDonald has joined the meeting. Mr. McDonald, are you there?
Yes. me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 7 minutes. If not, you can ask for maybe a minute or two more.
No, I think 7 minutes should be fine. I want to give, hopefully everyone had a chance to read the letter and declaration that we submitted. The letter was submitted by myself and covers the CEQA guidelines, explains the CEQA structure, as well as the case law with regard to the use of exemptions. The declaration was submitted to provide direct evidence of the city's traffic flow charts to show the unstudied traffic impacts of these uses being in such close proximity. With that, let me start by saying the issue here is not whether you like Sweet Flower as an operator or not. The issue is not anything to do with Sweet Flower's social equity program, Sweet Flower's business operations, Tim Dodd, or anything else. In fact, frankly, the issue is not Sweet Flower getting a CUP or not. Contrary to what Mr. Dodd said, our appeal froze that decision, and this is a de novo hearing, so they don't have a validly issued CUP. This is not about the zoning amendments that you did either recently. This is about whether the city is required to undertake environmental review of the cumulative impacts from the overconcentration of similar uses at the same place, which in this case just happens to be the Lake at Colorado traffic intersection. And if you look at the declaration and exhibits attached from Harvest Council, you'll see there's 30 to 40,000 cars on the north-south axis. You'll see there's 10 to 20,000 cars on the east-west axis. So the question really isn't about, you know, are they going to be a good operator? Are they going to be good for the community? That all can be dealt with. The question is, in the first instance, do you first have to study the environmental impacts of the cumulative concentration of these particular type of uses? And we set forth in our papers how CEQA works in that. The three-tier structure, we put forward the law that shows that it's procedural. This is not something that deals with the substance of its operations or social equity program, as Mr. Dodd was saying. So the question really becomes, do these two exemptions apply? Because the city, initially, the city council said, we don't need to do any environmental review of the zoning code amendments because we'll do it when the applications come through. Now the applications are coming through and nobody's doing that environmental analysis either. If you take a look at Exhibit A to my letter, you'll see it was expressly represented that environmental review would be done, but now it's not. The reason is this: staff believes that the existing facilities exemption applies to the building as the facility. The case law that we put forward in front of you on pages 5 and 6 shows it applies to the use. It is the use that generates the traffic impacts, the noise impacts, not an empty building sitting there by itself. The other area of disagreement is we've set forth on page 7 the small structures exemption, and it refers to hotels, motels, offices, and staff believes that the offices can mean any commercial use, when in fact we've set forward the case law that says no, that's not the case. Those are the two big areas of interpretation where there are differences. We believe ours is correct based on the law that we've set forward in front of you, as well as the fact that section 15300 that we've cited specifically says you cannot use exemptions when there are cumulative impacts. Nobody in staff's presentation, nor did Mr. Dodd, tell you they studied anything, because they didn't. And that's what we're objecting to. Does it mean that they have to put his application on hold for a little bit while they go do that? Yeah, sure. But you do that all the time with a variety of uses. You do that with bars, restaurants, and other uses that have distance separation requirements. You do it with schools. You require traffic studies for schools. You do it with new projects. It's a very common practice. So it's not that big a deal to have it done. The fact of the matter is it wasn't done, and it should be done because they are 457 feet from another cannabis dealer. They are within the same district as another cannabis dealer, actually two. Atrium has the right to come forward too. So there would be 3 in District 3, 450 some odd feet apart. So that's why we're saying now's the time to address the cumulative impacts. And the law supports us on that. And that's why we're asking you not to approve the CEQA determination until that's done. Thank you.
The clerk informs me there's no public comment, so we can move directly into rebuttal.
So, Mr. McDonald, you would be first up to rebut. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add or any closing statements, and then Mr. Dodd would be able to comment after you.
I would just leave with this question. Where is the traffic study? Where is the noise study? Where are the impact studies, cumulative studies? If they exist, then they'd be sitting in front of you tonight. They don't exist, and that's why they're not sitting in front of you. And that's why we're saying you cannot make that determination. You don't have any evidence, let alone substantial evidence. And as we point out in our letter, the burden's on the city, not me. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll turn to Mr. Dodd. If you want to
Thank you. A few points. Thank you. A few points. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think first off, the city has said as much in its filings in responding to the appellant's numerous lawsuits. I believe the city simply said that this is 2 large companies misusing CEQA to block competition, and that's really the meat of this matter. I'm sorry, but that I believe is, from my point of view, is a very well stated position from the city of Pasadena. Secondly, the city is relying on validly determined CEQA exemptions. Cannabis this use is retail. We're not a restaurant or a bar. It was retail before, it was retail now, and we are also a small business. This is 1,400 square feet, and we are, under the CEQA exemption, a store. We are a retail store. Those are my points. Everything else, I think the city has very validly, city attorney, the city staff has very validly and correctly set forth their opinion on CEQA. I think it's very clear in the city presentation and the city report that this was a validly enacted and unanimously approved CUP. Again, I would remind Mr. McDonald that we are the only unanimously approved cannabis operator in the city, and we would simply like to go forward with our operation forthwith. So I thank you very much this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, that completes the public hearing process for testimony from the applicant and the appellant.
Let me just first turn to the staff for an opportunity to respond to some of the assertions made by Mr. McDonald. It seems to be Mr. McDonald's argument lacks the clear evidence of impact before we do what he'd like us to do. Do you want to address that issue?
I think that's correct, Mayor. The exemptions we've cited, the 01 and the 03 under 1500 of the state CEQA guidelines do provide for both the changes to this existing structure without any addition to square footage, as well as the change of use. The exception to the exemption with respect to cumulative impact, he is correct that you cannot use an exemption when there's evidence of a significant impact. There is no evidence of a significant environmental impact, and therefore the exemptions that we have cited do apply. And again, they are the same ones that were used for both Harvest and Essence.
So the absence of evidence of a significant impact would be if we were changing the use from one retail use to another, and I'm sorry, not from one retail use to another, but from retail to another use.
Or really in this case, I think a traffic study showing that the project exceeds the thresholds under VT or VMT from a cumulative perspective, and we've not seen that.
I see. Okay, Mr. Kennedy, followed by Ms. Williams. No, okay. Mr. Kennedy.
This issue have been debated significantly prior to tonight, and so I'll make every effort in light of our agenda our full agenda to keep my comments short. First, I would like to commend Mr. Tim Dodd for even having the discussion related to social equity and sharing with the council what his company plans to do in that vein. African Americans and Latinos never really had an opportunity to play because there was not a level playing field, because the prior city manager was not interested per se in really small operators of the cannabis business be given full opportunity. Recognizing that the former city manager is not here to defend himself, it is not necessary that I go down that road any further. Additionally, it is my contention and remains my contention that the voters of Pasadena have spoken, and that argument did not work when I said that there was up to one cannabis retailer per district. There were a majority of the council that felt that the recommendation that really came from the city manager and the director, David Reyes of development, was a way in which to get us moving in terms of cannabis retail operations. I still believe my objections are valid, and I'm hoping that there is a way in which to validate my objections, but I will not be pursuing any legal action, obviously. As it relates to cumulative impact, there is no doubt that the spacing of the cannabis operations in District 3 potentially have a cumulative impact. We're only talking about 2 retail operations now, but it was always contemplated by staff that you would shove 3 down the throat of District 3 as opposed to distributed them fairly throughout the whole city. Fundamentally, I find that flawed and unfair. Mr. Tim Dodd referenced Steve Olivas, an attorney who respected the chair of the Planning Commission and my representative or appointee to that body. I have the utmost respect for him, and I believe that we have such a relationship that if he feels strongly about an issue, he's free to vote his conscience, and that's what he did. So I applaud that effort. Back to the social equity, which is not really for consideration tonight, but since the appellant shared their view, I would simply like to say this. Thank you for the positive steps that you and whoever else you are working on to expunge the record of Latinos and African Americans who are unjustly convicted of crimes that are now not a crime, and in my view, had a color-based configuration to even bringing actions against those individuals. So you're doing the right thing. I just want you to know I have a fundamental objection in the manner in which not you supplied a solution, but how staff supplied a solution for the consideration of the council. So I do not believe at this point the CEQA requirements can be found, and therefore I will not be able to support the recommendation, or if I have this correct, the recommendation by staff. I wish you well, Mr. Dodd. You've conducted yourself as a gentleman and a responsible businessman. And if I do fail, I will welcome you to District 3 and hope that you would continue to move forward where the city of Pasadena has failed thus far as it relates to social equity. And I invite the environmental, the committee that my colleague, Mr. Hampton, chairs to fix that problem. And he has assured me that he will work on that to make sure that we see such diversity required in those who actually receive retail licenses to operate a cannabis business in the city of Pasadena. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr.
Don't expect any necessarily a response. They're for the record. In my objection and ongoing objection, I thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to make my comments. And I thank all of those who have been involved, and particularly Mr. Dodd, for stepping up in a very positive way.
I'd like to motion to close public hearing, Mayor.
Motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Roll call on the closing of the public hearing.
Yes.
Councilmember Hampton said yes. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
Public hearing is closed.
Okay.
I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
There's a motion to move staff's recommendation, and just for the record, Mr. Hampton, that includes the specific findings for the CUP that are found in attachment A and the conditions of approval for the CUP that are found in attachment B, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's a motion to approve as recommended.
I had a question, Mayor, before we take a vote.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
I just want to confirm that the outcome of that motion would be consistent with the unanimous finding and recommendation of the Planning Commission. So this is a mirror motion.
That's correct, Vice Mayor Wilson.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a second, Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Hampton?
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy?
No.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
No.
Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
No.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The motion passes 5 in favor, 3 against.
Okay. Next, we'll move on. Thank you to everyone. Next, we'll move on to item 16. This matter has been before us previously. This is the Lincoln Avenue specific plan and the general plan land use diagram amendments for the specific plan.
And this is item 16 and item 19 going to be discussed concurrently as there's a related ordinance to go along with item 16. And I will,
Mayor,
I was going to
Yes.
open the.
are there any public comments?
No, there isn't, but I need to open the public hearing.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. This is a time and place for the public hearing on general plan land use diagram amendment for Lincoln Avenue specific plan. On February 28th, March 3rd, and March 10th, the public hearing notice was published in the Pasadena Press. Let me see. For items 16 and 19, 2 letters were received in opposition to amending the Pasadena Municipal Code to implement the Lincoln Avenue specific plan update, and 1 letter expressing concerns with the city's compliance with state housing laws. And those correspondence were carried over from the previous time that this ordinance was before the council, but they have not been withdrawn by anybody. So we wanted to report that out. And that correspondence has been distributed to the council, posted online, and is part of the record for tonight's hearing.
Thank you. And just for the record, Ms. Kurtz is back in the chambers in the city manager's chair. Mr. Hampton, the public hearing is open.
Yeah, I would like to close the public hearing. I mean, we've already heard this.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Mr. Kennedy, is your hand up or is that from the previous?
There you go, Mayor.
Yeah, to close the public hearing. Mr. Kennedy, did you have your hand up? No?
No,
Okay.
sir.
Roll call on closing of the public hearing.
Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The public hearing is closed.
Mr. Hampton, did you want to make a motion? I suspect.
I would like to make a motion to remove approval of the Lincoln Avenue specific plan.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. There's no public comment, correct?
There's no
This matter's been reviewed numerous times and there's been opportunity for public comment. And seeing no public comment, there's a motion today. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
To approve the staff recommendation, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The motion is approved without opposition.
Congratulations to everyone who participated in the development of this specific plan, a very important planning document for this part of our city. And congratulations to you, Mr. Hampton. I know you've been very involved in shepherding this this matter through the process.
Mayor, there is a related ordinance with this item, and I just
I'll make an offer.
Okay.
offered that by Mr. Hampton, and I will read.
That's number 19, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's number 19. This is an ordinance of the city of Pasadena amending various sections of Title 17 zoning code of the city of Pasadena Municipal Code to implement the Lincoln Avenue specific plan update and amending the official zoning map established by the zoning code, chapter 17.20, section 17.20.020 to modify the boundaries of the Lincoln Avenue specific plan, redesignate zones within the specific plan area, and redesignate zones for parcels located outside of the specific plan area. It was offered by Councilmember Hampton. Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams.
Yes.
That was a yes. Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The ordinance has been, first reading for the ordinance has been successfully conducted.
Okay.
Mayor, before David leaves, I just want to convey my gratitude to him and his staff for working so hard and diligently on all of our specific plans, but most in particular to the Lincoln Avenue specific plan. And thank you, Mayor, for your help and the whole council for getting this along. So very grateful for this work and looking forward to all the new businesses and different activities that will be happening on Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes is hanging out with us for another matter.
By the way, David, that's a nice suit.
He said thank you.
He's cheating. He has the same suit. I've seen it.
We are
Next.
moving on to item
Tyrone does.
17. This is a time and place for the public hearing on the appeal of the Board of Zoning Appeals decision on Hillside Development Permit number 6838 for the property located at 820 Linda Vista Avenue. No publishing was required. However, a mailing and a posting of the public hearing notice was completed on February 28th, 2022. The city clerk's office received This is updated numbers due to recent correspondence. 5 letters in support of the staff recommendation and proposed project. 1 letter in opposition to the staff recommendation and the proposed project. 1 letter expressing concerns with the revised proposed project that blocks protected views and the public safety impacts of the additional hillside development, and 1 letter providing information on the view from the house at 1820 Linda Vista Avenue. All the correspondence was posted online, distributed to the council, and is part of the record for this public hearing. This is again another appeal hearing, Mayor. So following the staff presentation, there will be opportunity for council questions. The applicant will have a 7 to 10 minute presentation. The appellant would have a 7 to 10 minute presentation. The council can ask questions after each presentation. We would hear from members of the public if any speaker cards are in the queue to call on. Then the appellant would have a 3-minute rebuttal, up to a 3-minute rebuttal, and the applicant would have a 3-minute rebuttal. You would close the hearing and the council could start their deliberations.
Thank you. And I'd like to just remind all parties that this matter is, the council's hearing this matter in its quasi-judicial capacity. And so it's important to keep that in mind for the benefit of all. So, Mr. Reyes?
Mayor, thank you. This is in addition to an existing single-family home. One of the issues that we've heard throughout the conversation, as this has been going on for quite some time at both the hearing officer and the BZA or Board of Zoning Appeals level, is the bifurcation of analysis and the issue that the state has come in and said that ADUs are non-discretionary and that ADUs are not subject to any local approval process. And so we have created a process where we've evaluated the entirety of the project, including the ADU, from a CEQA perspective. But it is correct that the ADU is not part of the HDP per se. It's not subject to the hillside development permit standards, but we have evaluated it from a CEQA and geotechnical perspective, and we have that this evening. I'd like to turn it over to Catherine Moran to make a presentation.
Ms. Moran, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'm Catherine Moran, Associate Planner, and I will be presenting Hillside Development Permit number 6838, located at 1820 Linda Vista Avenue. The request is to allow the construction of a 1,364 square foot addition to the existing street level, a 315 square foot addition to enclose and convert the existing carport to garage, a 158 square foot lower story storage space addition, and an 807 square foot lower story ADU, deck and pool, for a total of a 3,816 square foot for the residents, a 754 square foot garage, and 5,535 gross square feet of overall floor area. A hillside development permit is required for a first floor addition greater than 500 square feet within the RS4 HD zoning district. The ADU, deck, and pool are allowed by right and are not a part of the HDP. The proposed site plan shows the project is comprised of 3 separate additions, including a 315 square foot addition to enclose and add on to the existing carport, shown in yellow toward the front of the house, a 163 square foot addition, and the conversion of the existing garage at the southern elevation, shown in blue, and an 872 square foot addition to the north portion of the residence, shown in pink. The proposed deck, pool, and lower story ADU and storage areas are shown in green. It's important to note that the total living area square footage, not including the garage or storage area, is to be reduced by 37 square feet to comply with the Board of Zoning Appeals condition of approval from the November 18th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. The proposed project meets all RS4 HD development standards, including FAR, lot coverage, height, setbacks, neighborhood compatibility, and the Arroyo Seco sloping setback, etc. The applicant has designed the proposed additions to maintain the existing mid-century modern residence's
single-story street presence and massing, as you can see from the existing and proposed elevations. The proposed design utilizes earth tone materials and colors and is compatible with the similar architectural characteristics featured in homes within the vicinity. The applicant designed the project to minimize privacy to the abutting property to the south by limiting proposed windows to clerestory windows 12 feet and up, as you can see in the proposed south side elevation. The proposed 807 square foot ADU has been designed to utilize the space underneath the northern portion of the addition and deck in what would otherwise be considered empty space. The proposed storage space consists of the pool equipment storage area underneath the main residence's footprint. The Hillside Overlay District includes provisions to protect abutting homes' views of culturally significant structures such as the Rose Bowl, Colorado Street Bridge, City Hall, downslope views of the valley floor, prominent ridge lines, and the horizon line. New structures and tall landscaping shall not be centered directly in the view of any room of a primary structure on a neighboring parcel. Views shall be considered from windows of any room in the primary structure. Views of open sky, existing foliage, private yards, and existing structures on surrounding properties shall not be taken into consideration by the review authority. This map shows the general view corridor of where the views of culturally significant structures would be located. The Arroyo Secos Valley floor is to the east of 1812 Linda Vista Avenue, and the San Gabriel Mountains to the east and northeast. It does not represent windows on the property, only the general directions where the views of the culturally significant structures may occur. The project was designed as an aggregate of 3 smaller additions at multiple locations, all single level, in order to minimize massing to the maximum extent feasible. The views from the residence at the north at 1840 Linda Vista are not protected views. 1812 Linda Vista Avenue is a 2-story home south adjacent to the existing single-story residence at 1820 Linda Vista Avenue. 1812 Linda Vista's primary views are to the north of the San Gabriel Mountains at the 2nd story and to the east of the downslope view of the valley floor. On the northeast facade of 1812 Linda Vista Avenue, there are approximately 10 existing 2nd-story windows, none of which would be impacted by the proposed project since it's not adding an upper story addition. Although the project will minimally impact views from the southern property, any 1st-story views north across the subject site would be reasonably limited to existing foliage, the private yard, the existing structure, and the open sky. The city does not protect these views. The proposed addition is not centered directly in front of any of the ridgelines. Since the proposed project is not adding an addition on top of the 1st story and is building on the flattest portions of the lot with minimal massing over the slope, the project is designed to limit view impacts to the maximum extent feasible. Story poles visually illustrate how the applicant is proposing a single-story addition to fill in the existing breezeway between the existing carport and the residence for the conversion of the proposed 2-car garage. From staff's site visit, 1812 Linda Vista Avenue's 1st floor windows primarily have views of existing foliage, the private yard, the existing residence at 1820 Linda Vista Avenue, and the open sky. Of the photos and videos provided by the neighbor's representative, any views of the ridgeline are either already blocked by the existing structures and foliage, or the views are shown from various non-centered angles. The zoning code states that new structures and tall landscaping should not be centered directly in the view of any room of a primary structure on a neighboring parcel. Furthermore, the proposed addition, as portrayed by the story poles, is not considered as centered directly in front of any prominent ridgeline, as the ridgeline is already obstructed by the existing residence and foliage. In review of the HDP requirements, the project consists of both ministerial and discretionary action. The ministerial action is for the 807 square foot attached ADU at the lower story and the deck expansion with infinity swimming pool and spa. Each of these improvements, additionally and cumulatively, do not require discretionary submittal of a hillside development permit. However, they were evaluated as a part of the comprehensive project and were assessed in the geotechnical report reviewed by additional city departments and evaluated for general compliance. The discretionary action requiring the HDP is the living area addition of 1,364 square feet, 754 square foot garage, and 158 square foot aggregate storage area. The aggregate project, including both ministerial actions and discretionary actions, is exempt from CEQA under the Class 1 existing facilities categorical exemption. The Class 1 exemption exempts additions to existing structures, provided that the addition will not result in an increase of more than 10,000 square feet when the project is in an area where all public services and facilities are available to allow for maximum development permissible in the general plan, and the area in which the project is located is not environmentally sensitive. The proposed project does not exceed the size threshold, is in an area where all public services and facilities are available, is a developed lot, and is not environmentally sensitive. Therefore, the proposal is exempt from environmental review. The project is not considered as unusual in terms of size, location, or vicinity to historic resources. The Design and Historic Preservation section determined that the existing structure is not eligible for historical designation. The project does not meet the eligibility requirements for the exception clause, as the project would not cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of a historic resource. Staff is able to make all the required findings. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the Hillside Development Permit number 6838 and the adoption of the environmental determination. This concludes staff's presentation. Both staff and the applicant are available for any questions.
Thank you. Next, are there any questions from members of the City Council? Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I had one. I thought I read in the staff report something about this project being in conflict with the neighborhood compatibility anti-mansionization ordinance. I don't know if you could address that, Catherine, but can someone talk to that item?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly say that the Board of Zoning Appeals required a condition, which the applicant is bringing forward this evening, to reduce the project size by 37 square feet, which would make the project, and there was a slide that Catherine had put up that shows the project is consistent with the neighborhood compatibility in terms of the median square footage of homes in the area. So it does not exceed that threshold, Vice Mayor.
So with that adjustment, it would be compatible.
Yes, sir.
So in essence,
okay, thank you for clarifying.
So in essence, the applicant took two actions. One was to reduce the size of the main structure of the house, and put square footage into an ADU, 857 square feet. That making the ADU issue a ministerial act on the part of the council, and then reduced it an additional 37?
That's correct, Mayor.
To address that issue. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. So two kind of similar questions, but so this is a revised project than the one the hearing officer saw, went to BZA, came to us, and went back to BZA. Since it's a revised project, does it need to go back to the hearing officer?
So the Board of Zoning Appeals took a de novo action. And so at council is when they tried to revise the project. And at that point, the city council said, no, we got to send it back. So it was set back for a new hearing, de novo hearing before the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals did conduct a hearing on this project. So it does not need to go back to the hearing officer.
Okay, but it's appropriate for the BZA to review the revised project.
Correct. Okay. And they did.
And then secondly, the, without going back to what the BZA did, what was their process for determining the 18-inch reduction in the garage as addressing the view protection issues?
Mr. Rocha or Catherine, do you want to get into the specifics? I can talk about the general.
Good evening, members of the council. During the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, the Board of Zoning Appeals was presented with various photographs and images, both by the applicant and appellant team. And utilizing those images along with the images of the silhouette that was existing at the site, the Board of Zoning Appeals felt appropriate that an 18-inch reduction to the roof line would help minimize the view impacts of the proposed construction.
Was the 18, and I'm sorry, was the 18 inches to make it align with the existing garage roof line, or was there some other significance to the 18 inches?
I don't know the answer to
Okay,
that question.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
And then just a follow up to that, and we could hear from the appellant, but did that address the view protection issues? What is their response to the 18-inch reduction? Thanks.
Just a follow-up question on the issue of the first question raised by Ms. Williams. So I did notice in the appellant's, I'm sorry, no, the appellant's justification for appeal, numbers 4 and 5. 4 argued that that the matter should have returned to the hearing officer prior to going back to BOZA, and 5 is just an outright argument that BOZA had no jurisdiction. Are those one and the same issue, or is there a separate issue that's to argue that BOZA had no jurisdiction?
The same, largely the same, Mayor, and the issue is under the city's municipal code, during the appeal process, it is right and just and actually contemplated that a project would be changed in response to appeal issues. And the project had changed, but it changed significantly from the standpoint of square footages, so that we did not feel it was appropriate that the city council would hear that revised project that's before you now before the Board of Zoning Appeals. But there's nothing in the code that would require it to go all the way back to the hearing officer. So the Board of Zoning Appeals took an action on a different project. Project gets revised, and before the council can hear it, we send it back to the Board of Zoning Appeals so they can hear the revised project. And action was taken appropriately on that project for approval, and that's what's before you this evening.
I see. So if said differently, we don't have to go back to the hearing officer, but if the revised project from the original project we need at BOZA had come to city council, then that might be a valid argument that we lack jurisdiction to hear it.
That's correct.
It's a changed project that should have come back to BOZA.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we start with the
applicants, which would be, I believe, Mr. Matthew Feldhouse. Sorry if I got that wrong. And Richard McDonald. I think Mr. Feldhouse is the one who will be leading the applicant presentation. And we can pull up. Do we have a? Yes. We have your PowerPoint coming up, and then you'll have 7 to 10 minutes to make your presentation. And I'll just let you know with a ring of the bell if there's 30 seconds left on the initial 7. If you need some more time, just let us know, and then we'll move on. Yeah, that is the right one. Hold on 1 second. We'll get it posted so that everybody can see it. All right. Will you, if you say next, we'll move the slide forward. Mr. Feldhouse?
All right, thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, honorable council members. Happy Pi Day to everybody. Hopefully, everybody has pizza plans after the meeting tonight. But I wanted to go through the project and discuss the process that we went through in order to come up with the initial design on both the architect and the homeowner for the project. So if you go to the next slide. The subject property is at the northwest corner of the Rose Bowl area on Linda Vista Avenue. The appellant is the project, the house to the south of the subject property. Next slide. We looked at 4 different options before we settled on a most effective project. Site option number 1 looked at providing an addition to the front of the property at the flat portion of the land. This option was rejected because it affected the streetscape along Linda Vista Avenue too much. Next slide. We also looked at a second-story addition, and given the placement of the second-story addition, we felt that there might be options where it affected the view corridors, not only for the appellant in this case, their second story, but also potentially the property across the street at Linda Vista Avenue. Might affect the floor views that are protected. Next slide. Option 3, we looked at an H-shaped plan that would provide some continuity and regularity to the floor plan. We looked at infilling the garage or the existing carport and turning that into a garage. One of the wings would become the master bedroom or primary bedroom, and the second wing would become a private suite for our elderly parents. Next slide. You can see what we did was we pared back the addition to closest to the appellant's property in order to preserve any potential view impacts to the property. We really are proposing adjacent to the appellant's property an infill project where we're just basically towards the south of this existing building, filling in the area that's the carport now to become a full-size garage, and squaring off the edge of the building towards the east side, looking towards the Brookside Golf Course. We've also received substantial support from the neighborhood of this proposed option. We received a letter from the neighbor directly to the north that supports the project, 1860 Linda Vista. His name is Clayton Holpeter. We also received to the north of that parcel approval or support for the project at 1854 Linda Vista. Her name is Alice Berkestrand. And we also received letters of support from the former homeowner of this property, 1820 Linda Vista, as well as the former homeowner of the appellant's property, 1812 Linda Vista Avenue. So if you go to the next slide. Just quickly, the floor plan development, the areas in green are the additions. The blue area is a conversion of the existing garage into living space, and the yellow is the conversion of the existing carport into a full-size garage. The appellant's property is to the right side of this floor plan, where you can see that most of the proposed project is just infilling the existing space. We're also proposing to maintain 62% of the existing exterior walls to create an ecological reuse solution. And we've managed to keep the scale and the rhythm of the single-story house from the public right-of-way at Linda Vista Avenue. We've also been respectful of the appellant's privacy concerns and proposed no windows along the south facade that faces his property. Next slide. Here you can see the proposed front elevation from Linda Vista Avenue. Next slide. The south elevation, this rendering proposes additional landscaping to be provided for to address some of the neighbors' privacy concerns. And there's also a significant amount of existing foliage and landscaping that's depicted in the rendering. The bottom rendering here is the elevation of the north facade from, as I mentioned, 1860 Linda Vista's perspective. Next slide. This is the rear elevation of the property. Next slide. BZA conditions of approval looked at altering the height of the garage as well as the discussed 37 square foot reduction. Both conditions of approval are acceptable to us. The rendering at the bottom here is a depiction of the lowering of the garage roof by 18 inches to address the conditions of approval. Next slide. We also also reached out following the BZA approval to offer, in addition, to reduce the addition adjacent to the appellant's property by 2 feet so that it doesn't extend beyond any of the existing walls of the existing residence. The rendering here on the lower left-hand side shows the alteration of that proposal with the overlaid on the existing story poles. Next slide. Addressing the neighbors' concerns, next slide. In the BZA discussion, we looked at not having views centered directly on any of the rooms, the culturally significant items. The photos that they've provided have all been unprotected views that are either from the exterior patio of the property, or it's peeking through existing foliage, existing roof lines, chimneys, etc. Next slide. These are some of the photos that were provided by the appellant. They've mischaracterized some of the proposed story pole locations. Next slide. This is actually the correct silhouette of the proposed story poles, and as you can see, there still is a peekaboo ridgeline view, through, over and around existing foliage and roof lines. Next slide. This was also evidence that was submitted by the appellant. As you can see, there really is no view through this window, trying to look around existing foliage and roof lines. Next slide.
Sir, I'm concerned you're going to run out of time. I know you've got 26 slides and you're probably 17 or 18. And your time is running out. I just want to be sure you're conscious of that.
Okay. Additional rebuttal to some of the photos that were submitted. As you can see, there's still a depiction of ridgeline, albeit small as you peek through the corners of the windows. Next slide. This provides the vantage point that the appellant provided the photo taken. As you can see, the arch location of the window. Next slide. Again, this is taken at the top of the arch window location. Still have ridgeline available and visible through this photo. Next slide. This is the depicted location of that photo. Next slide. This is the photo that they presented from their kitchen. As you can see, it looks through existing foliage and roof lines. Next slide. This is the photo that they provided from their back patio. As you can see, faintly you can see a ridge line through this photo. The gray shaded area is the proposed addition in that location. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that they've provided additional description, which appears to be a photo taken from the outside patio. The previous slide showed what the true view of that was from that window. This is a photo taken from the MLS of their backyard. As you can see, that window is located within a deep recess of an arcade at that back patio. Next slide.
You have 15 seconds
These
left.
are the photos that, excuse me?
You have 15 seconds left.
Okay, these are the photos that we've taken from our property because we weren't provided access to view from their windows. As you can see, most of the window locations are blocked by trees and roof lines. Next slide.
Mr. Feldhaus, your 10 minutes has expired. If you want to bring your comment to a close.
You'll just wrap it up.
As a close, we feel that we've designed the proposed project with respect to the neighbors' concerns. It's addressed to the greatest extent feasible, proposing any additions that are least impactful to this neighbor to the south.
Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from the appellants.
Did you want to allow the council to ask any
sorry.
questions on
Any
this
questions for
presentation?
the applicant?
I do have one question. So the applicant mentioned a 2-foot reduction of the addition. Was that actually a condition of approval of the BZA, or is that something that is being offered at this point? Is that included in the project we're reviewing?
That was not a condition of approval. It was subsequent to the BZA approval. We proposed that to the neighbor in attempts to come to a resolution,
Okay, so but that is something that you're willing to continue to propose?
it is,
Okay, thank you.
as well as the landscaping at the shared property line.
So next we will have the appellants give their presentation. They have 7 to 10 minutes. I will set a timer for 7 minutes, let you know when that's expired, and then we'll go through the process if you need up to 10. And you need us to bring up your PDF document that you submitted. So it'll give us it'll give us a second. We'll do the best we can. It doesn't work great with our chamber technology, but we'll do the best we can in trying to make it work for you.
I appreciate that. If you could just go to page 10, I think that'll probably do a lot of the work for us. Just type 10 in next to the 32. Perfect. All right.
He's bringing it over
Let me
so
know.
everybody can see it. Hold on one second. Okay. All right, we will start your time now.
Okay, thank you. Steve Weaver on behalf of the appellant. Thank you for the time. I just want to note that the presentation by the planning department was a bit biased and left out a lot of facts, including the procedural history. And everyone on the side of the developer, which includes the planning department, is misconstruing the view ordinance, which was something this council signed into law in 2017. I believe Councilmember Hampton actually sponsored that bill. It's to protect people on the hillside from the getting their views just impacted by mansionization and overdevelopment. It's for the protection of the public. So this picture, for just take a step back, the Board of Zoning Appeals looked at a different project than they did on the first time than they did the second time. The first time there was no ADU, which is an entirely separate residence unit. The second time they added an ADU in the project, and there's no basis for a do-over decision. It's odd the BZA to unanimously find that there's view obstruction in the first decision and then redecide on a different project which should have gone through the hearing officer because it's a different nature, has a different residence component. And then to say the same heights, which haven't changed, we're just not going to address our previous findings. So because the staff has continued to mislead on the actual statute, I'll just go ahead and read it because they've misled us to the point that structures have to be centered in a view if they're protected structures. That only applies to, and I'm reading, new structures and tall landscaping shall not be centered directly in the view of any room of a primary structure on the neighboring parcel. So that just talks about any new structure. You can't just jam it into the middle. But there's a special provision for protected views, which include prominent ridgelines. New structures shall avoid blocking the following from any room of a main dwelling on the neighboring property. That's Municipal Code 17.29-.060-G. This is a window taken from the French doors, the east side window of the living room. You can see the reflective glass there on the right. It's not an outdoor picture. I took this picture on July 26th, and there's a video that accompanies all of this. This is just one window. This isn't even on the same side as the other 9 windows plus that overlook this development. But you can see that vertical pole is where the story poles are. Everything to the left of that is ridgeline. That's a gray mountain because you know what? There was a lot of cloudy days, unfortunately, in the summer, but that's how it went. So, and I apologize, I didn't include all the photos I put on here. I had some duplicates, but you can see other pictures, including the ones Mr. Feldhaus put up. There is ridgeline. It's protected views, and they went ahead and they just added all this height to it, offering reductions on the garage, which isn't even in the area that blocks the ridgeline, or moving the structure 2 feet inward. Imagine that 2 feet inward is still just blocking the view, and that's from an angle, which we're allowed to consider. So as far as the CEQA analysis goes, let's go ahead and jump to slide 27, if you wouldn't mind, on this one. Now, what you're going to see is a big pool, big infinity pool on a mountain with with no no analysis. How many gallons of water is it? It's not in the geotechnical report. It's nowhere. And then to go from more or less a modest home that hasn't been moved in 73 years, 2,425 square feet, to 4,660 square feet of residential area. That includes the ADU, which must be included as in the CEQA analysis, as it is now attached to this new discretionary project. That is just, it's simply mind-bending to go there. But finally, staff itself has admitted in its October 18th report, they acknowledged the unlawful ridgeline obstruction. They said in their October 18th report, which they revised multiple times later on, that although it appears that a portion of the ridgeline would be blocked from a first-story window by the new roof design of the single-story additions and remodel, the proposed structure is designed to avoid blocking views from the surrounding property to the maximum extent feasible. In other words, Mr. Park is not entitled to the protections of law, but the surrounding properties are. It's just blatant. Staff didn't do its job. They actually asked if they could come see the property. They didn't ask at the hearing the original hearing. They didn't try. The second time they asked if they take views from the outside. The third time they wanted, the third time before it went to the city council, they said, hey, can we take views? We said, we don't really think you're going to perform an unbiased analysis. And then the fourth time, when we came back, or the fifth, I lost track, we actually said to them, hey, you know what, you can take pictures. You can actually come into our place, take all the pictures you want. Just let me videotape you doing it. We just want to hold you accountable, and please share those pictures with us. They said, we don't agree to those conditions. So they didn't want to do an impartial analysis. And finally, I just want to point to a very troubling component of, I guess we didn't get a chance. Can you go to slide 27, please?
We are on slide 27.
We're on slide 10. It's
Back
10
to,
of 32.
back to slide 10. Yes.
You know what? I think everyone can see the massive pool on 27. We don't need to put that up for the audience. If we can, if there's time, let's go ahead and jump to slide 19.
19.
So just move the cursor to where the 10 is and type 19.
Did you want to bring up this email?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and start reading it, because to me this stuff is actually, this is troubling. So in response to the developer's questions about what can I do with this place, staff says to him, an issue I do potentially have concern for is adding the lower story ADU on the same permit as the 500 square foot master bedroom addition. The master bedroom addition may be considered a second story addition, which could potentially trigger the HDP. If there was a way to separate the ADU out for a subsequent permit, that may potentially be a better path. And this was before the application was sandwiched into some kind of redo appeal.
Could you hold on 1 second? Sorry, I don't mean to take, you're reading it, that's fine, but I'm hearing from a council member that we're stuck on, the video display is stuck on page 10.
Oh, there it is. Oh, you just got there.
Okay. So I paused your time.
Okay.
So right now it's 30 seconds. Go ahead.
30 seconds for the 7 minutes?
Of the 7 minutes, you'll have a couple more minutes. I'll just add another minute and a half to your time.
No problem. So again, if there was a way to separate the ADU out for a subsequent permit, that may potentially be a better path. So in other words, trying to avoid triggering the HDP, public review, and the hearing officer stage. This is called, in CEQA parlance, it's called segmenting. So when you take a project that together would actually trigger environmental review, such as a massive expansion on a hillside area, as required by our own laws in the city, then you go ahead and you just say, well, we'll do this part here, and this part here. And it's fine if developers want to play those games. It's actually not fine, it's illegal. But when the city's own staff is trying to counsel the developer and trying to push for the developer's project at every turn without analyzing the view ordinance properly, again, it's a lie to say that the ridgeline has to be centered in the view. Only tall new structures and tall landscaping shall be set. Any new structure needs to be not centered in a view, but ridge lines, they're protected views. It says so right in the code, and they went ahead and disregarded that. Not to mention the fact that, again, this is a new project. There's no CEQA analysis of the pool or how a structure next to two liquefaction zones, one being a massive public golf course and the other one being a small portion on the property to the north, why that doesn't require environmental analysis. I noticed Mr. McDonald was very keen on environmental analysis when he was arguing for his last client. Let's do traffic studies. Let's take a look. Let's slow down and take another look. But I guess here, he's not as concerned about the environmental analysis. And I just think, look, this is for protection of the public. So I'll go ahead and reserve my time. There are plenty of other pictures to look at, but they all show similar obstructions. Ridgeline is in there. You can see it. And as much as there is some vegetation on the other ones, I mean, it's just so obvious. It's just so clear. That's all I have.
So if there's council questions for the,
Yeah, any questions for the appellant? Ms. Williams?
Questions for staff in response to what the appellant has said. So can you review again the criteria for the categorical exemption here and address the issue of the sort of serial or sequencing of permits? And then secondly, also, I think you guys had a slide on what views are protected. Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah, and that would be slide 7, if you could pull that up. And then one of the issues that I stated at the outset, Councilmember Williams, has been the challenge at the state level with respect to overriding our rules. And so the ADUs throughout the city are ministerial. We don't have the ability to really deny them. And we obviously they meet certain setback requirements and square footage requirements, but we can't put any discretionary process to them. We can't apply CEQA to them. And we did. And as outlined on page 5 and 6 of the report, both geotechnically, we looked at the potential impacts of the addition of the pool, of the ADU, and the rest of the project. So the project as a whole, including the ADU, was analyzed from perspective. It's not part of the HTP process. It's just not. We can't have it be part of that analysis, but we can have it be part of the CEQA analysis. And so we've done that. And staff has appropriately analyzed that, and that's what's before you. And the standard is up to 10,000 square feet in terms of the exemption that's allowed by the state. And we can pull it up and read it directly, but it's up to 10,000 square feet. This is a minor addition in terms of what the neighborhood size is. It's perfectly compatible with the area median. And I think that the total, including the existing, would bring the house to about 5,000 square feet.
Okay, so since it was below 10,000 square feet, which is the threshold for the categorical exemption, an initial study was not done. So that's the reason?
That's correct, Councilor.
Okay, and that's our wonderful state law. So then the views, just want to go back to what is defined as a view? Is the ridge line defined as a view?
A prominent ridgeline is defined as a protected view. And actually don't have the clicker, but we do have a backup slide showing the exact zoning code language. I don't know off the top of my head. Okay, go back. Go back one more. Go back one more. Okay, so here we have, go back one more slide. So per section 1729060G, a proposed structure shall be designed and located so that it avoids blocking views from surrounding properties, adjacent properties, to the maximum extent feasible as determined by the review authority, and including, but not limited to, consideration of the following: the feasibility of relocating the proposed structure to another part of the site, the feasibility of modifying the massing of the proposed structure such that views from the surrounding properties would not be impacted, and the feasibility of minimizing architectural features that may intrude upon views from surrounding properties. If you go to the previous slide, actually, there's one more slide that talks about protected views. There should be.
not an accurate reading of the statute, I would say. Mr. Feldhouse had.
Sir,
No,
sir,
no, that's
sir,
not
sir,
appropriate.
sir, you'll have your opportunity for rebuttal.
Sorry, Catherine, which way would you like me to go? I know we just talked about this one. And Councilor, just to add to this section, it does give broad authority to the approval authority, broad discretion to the approval authority to define that. And that's why it's to the maximum extent feasible. And I'm not sure if there's a different section, Catherine, that you wanted us to go to, but I think this addresses the question.
Yes, thank you. Those are my two questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah, slide seven.
You want to take down the presentation? We'll see if any other council members.
If everybody could speak a little closer to the mic, there's a lot of choppiness.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Okay, so there are no public comments cards submitted for this item. So the appellant, who seemed anxious to want to speak, so you'll have 3 minutes now to speak, and then the applicant will have 3 minutes to speak. So Mr. Weaver, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. Mr. Feldhouse, I want to commend him because his slide actually had the actual language of view protection that we said it. They cut off at proposed structures shall be designed with a lofty language. They completely omitted where it says new structures and tall landscaping. So they didn't show you the language that shows prominent ridge lines and the actual point that I'm making, which is that the statute as an outset says you have to consider you can't block from any room of a primary residence in the hillside overlay district. You can't block prominent ridge lines from the view with your new structure. If you do, there's a separate process you go through. There's actually an additional process if you have to say there's something to it. But as a matter of law, that's not right. That's not right. And they showed the same slide that was erroneous at their last presentation and the one before that. Mr. Feldhouse had the right language. He actually, like, he showed some integrity, and I really commend him for it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, that completes your rebuttal period. We'll turn to Mr. Feldhouse or Mr. McDonald to do the rebuttal. You have 3 minutes.
I'll be doing the rebuttal.
3 minutes,
Matthew,
go
if
ahead.
you want to pull up the slide that has the ordinance or the language from the code on it, go ahead. I'm going to just make a couple of simple, what I believe are direct points, because I think staff has done this correctly. First, the statute starts with the language maximum extent feasible and then goes into specific examples from which council is pulling out one sentence. You have to, as always, read it in its totality and read the independent component parts together, what staff has done. Second, staff has studied the potential environmental impacts and provided you with those studies which show that the exemptions are warranted. My position, this case, the last case, whatever Mr. Weaver may want to say, is consistent in the belief that there has to be substantial evidence to support such exemptions, and in this case, there are. There also are no cumulative uses here or any other unusual circumstances, as Matthew explained. There's also, though, the BZA relied on the evidence that was presented to them. That evidence was the photograph that Matthew was showing you that showed there was no view obstruction, that the photographs that had been previously submitted were distortions by the prior owner, and that in fact, the addition can be done in a way that to the maximum extent feasible avoids any view impacts. His offer to even cut the building 2 more feet continues to show his good faith effort to try to get this resolved, because there's only one neighbor that's objecting to this. All the other neighbors are supportive of it. And in that regard, the most important pieces of evidence in front of you tonight, which I hope you've had a chance to look at, are the email from Elizabeth Houston and the letter from Lisa Johnson. Both are dated today. And Lisa Johnson grew up, she is the former owner of the 1820 Linda Vista property that Matthew bought. And Liz Houston is the former owner of the objecting neighbor. And they both agree that there is no view line obstruction. Lisa Johnson, the former owner of Matthew's house, says that the photographs that were being presented by the neighbor quote, was an exaggerated angle and is not the viewpoint if you were walking through the home. In reality, it would be a much lower angle and the view is from the back of the home only. I have discussed this with Liz Houston, who was the former owner of 1812, as her grandmother had actually built that restaurant. Liz and I concurred that there was no view from the side bottom windows, and that is why they entertained out the back as to the view over the Rose Bowl and golf course. And then Liz Houston herself, the former owner of the neighbor who's objecting, point blank says that there was no view of obstruction. She talks about the dining room view. When you walked in, you could see the golf course. When sitting facing 1820 in the 1812 dining room, all you could see was the carport and the garage and the side of the driveway.
Mr.
The view of
McDonald.
the mounds upstairs. Those are the two most important pieces of rebuttal evidence. The people that actually lived there, people that actually can tell you that there's no view obstruction.
Mr. McDonald, your time has expired.
Thank you. We would ask that you approve all the findings.
David, so very quickly while we have this slide up, so it sounds to me like we started out with a very different project and steps were in fact taken to minimize the view corridor impacts. So I'm looking at, what is that number? Why is it 1? It should be 4, right? 1, 2, 3. The second one, new structures. And tall landscaping shall not be centered directly in the view of any room. Is there any new development that's centered directly in the view of any room?
We don't believe it's centered directly in the.
The one I saw is out sort of off to the left, not centered. Okay, any other questions, Ms. Williams? Yeah, why don't we move, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
You got to second that, Hampton.
Mr. Hampton seconds. Roll call on closing the public hearing.
Okay. To close the public hearing, Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
and Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
The public hearing is closed.
And
Quick question, did this come with a traffic study?
Okay, Mr. Hampton, we'll move on.
Mayor, actually, I had one question, if you don't mind.
Sure. Mr. Wilson?
I just asked staff to re-articulate it's how the ADU fits into this project. I mean, are they evaluating it as a single, or are they evaluating the project independent of the ADU and doing the ADU as a separate approval concurrently?
Altogether, we did ask that the applicant include the ADU as part of the project. It's on all the project plans. It was part of all the analysis for building and safety purposes, geotechnical purposes. So it's been incorporated. It's just that it's not part of the official HDP findings, but we did incorporate it into the totality of the project for CEQA purposes in all studies.
But if with the addition of the HDP findings, and I know we have a bunch of I call get out of jail free cards for ADUs. If setting that aside, would it trigger some sort of, would it not be permitted with the ADU setting aside any type of state exemptions?
I don't know that it wouldn't be permitted as much as potentially additional findings would be required if that square footage was counted towards the ADU, towards the non-ADU and discretionary process. We'd be looking at potentially the, some of the other findings. So it's not that it wouldn't be permitted. Additional findings would likely be required.
So if we added the ADU, then it would not qualify under the neighborhood compatibility. That was, I know they dropped 37 feet or whatever it was to make sure they complied with the addition of the ADU, then they would not comply with
Yeah, the
that
additional
neighborhood compatibility?
that's correct. The additional findings for neighborhood compatibility would be required. But they could still
And it
apply.
wouldn't pass.
They could still apply. But additional
I'm sorry,
findings, I'm sorry, additional findings for the neighborhood compatibility would be required. It's not it's not prohibited.
Right, but once again, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. I know they shrunk the project by 37 feet to comply with the neighborhood compatibility requirement.
Why the
If
ADU space is,
So was the ADU space counted in that compliance, or is that kind of not counted because it's an ADU?
Correct, not counted.
Not counted. Okay.
and we don't control that.
Okay.
No, we don't.
I know, I'm just thinking like, you know, I'm trying to think, we see ADUs come through independently, and now we have a project that has new construction and an ADU built into it. So it's a little bit confusing in terms of their two separate actions here, I guess.
That's right.
Thank you, David.
Yes, Ms. Williams.
So to follow on to Vice Mayor Wilson's comments, the way I believe we can control or sort of have ADUs, kind of close this loophole for ADUs, is the environmental sensitivity that we use to establish the hillside protection overlay zone in the first place. That building more housing in fire-prone areas, in hillside areas, is probably not in the best interest of public safety. And I think that we should, I'm trying to separate this into there's sort of the application that we are reviewing, and then there are the policy implications. So just starting with the application, it seems to me that a little bit more could be done here to achieve the maximum extent feasible of revising the project. And if the 2 feet that the applicant had offered could be a condition on the project, perhaps that gets to the maximum extent feasible. I would feel comfortable with that if they put that in as a condition. And then the second policy issue is I think that we absolutely need to review the hillside ordinance and create exemptions for ADUs, for additional structures, because it is a fire prone area. And that is an exemption under SB 9, under ADUs, and that's a way that we can help protect the public and ensure that that development in hillside areas is consistent with why we established the overlay in the first place, which was environmental sensitivity, to protect the view sheds and all of those sorts of things. I think that would help prevent something like this in the future. Thanks.
On the second point, that's something that maybe staff can come back to us with options from the safety perspective and the potential exemption and impacts of SB 9. I'd be curious to see that in the form of a memo before we bring that back. Mr. Hampton?
Yeah, I actually have a question, and I think that was a wonderful suggestion. I was under the impression that most projects of this size, and maybe it's if it's hillsides, and maybe we should talk about that as well. I thought most projects of this size would require sprinklers.
I think they are. Oh no, that was the previous one. Yeah, that was the other one that requires sprinklers.
Yeah. Does this project require sprinklers, Mr. Reyes?
It's condition number 29 of attachment B. It does require sprinklers.
And do all hillside projects require sprinklers if they go over a threshold of, if it's just a renovation, maybe not, but if I'm adding a extra 500 square feet, isn't there a higher threshold for sprinklers in hillside?
Yes, certainly new construction does. And then additions of a certain size, and I apologize, I don't have that committed to memory, but we can send out that email to everybody to get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so a question Ms. Williams, was that a motion?
Well, I
With
would
the-
be willing to make a motion to uphold the BZA's decision to approve the project
With the condition.
with the condition that of the 2-foot reduction in the addition.
And my understanding is that that's something that was offered by the applicant, correct? Okay. I
We
see-
should also think there was a
I see the-
offer of
I see the
some
applicant
additional
saying this.
landscaping. I think there was a landscaping offer as well, and I guess we could, I don't know if we want to include that as something they could, as a condition subject to the neighbor's desire to have that landscaping.
Yes, include that in the motion.
Thank you. Friendly amendment.
Okay. Mr. Kennedy, you accept the friendly amendments? Anybody want to offer a traffic study with this?
Hampton?
Hampton? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Hampton,
Yes.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Yes.
Councilmember Madison,
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda,
Yes.
Councilmember Rivas,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson,
Yes.
Mayor Gordo.
Yes.
So the staff recommendation was approved with the amendments as noted by Councilmember Williams. The motion is approved without opposition.
And with staff, and with request for staff to come back with the hillside ordinance, the sprinklers, and then to look at ways to further protect safety in the hillside areas with development.
And I just note that the motion contemplated the first recommendation, which was the CEQA finding, right? So that was part of, it was staff recommendation. Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. The findings as well as the conditions. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And that completes this matter.
Thank you.
Item 20 is the second reading of an ordinance. This is an ordinance of the City of Pasadena adding a new chapter 8.66 to Title 8 of the Pasadena Municipal Code entitled, quote, Organics Recycling Requirements for Residential and Commercial Generators, Haulers, Treatment Facilities, Edible Food Generators, and Recovery Organizations. It was offered by Councilmember Madison last time. So Councilmember Hampton? To adopt the
Yes.
ordinance? Yes. Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes.
Councilmember Madison?
Yes.
Councilmember Masuda?
Mark, I'd like to vote for this, but I wasn't here for when this was discussed.
The city attorney is saying you can vote for it if you would like to.
I'd like to vote for it. Thank you.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Rivas?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Mayor Gordo?
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted unanimously.
Thank you. And next, I think that completes our public agenda, and the council will adjourn back into recess, back into closed session to complete the items that we were not able to complete at the beginning of the special meeting.
We do have public comment on item E on the closed session. So the first speaker will be Nicole King, followed by Alan Shea, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Karina Kay. Ms. King, you have 90, sorry. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Good evening. As a family member of Anthony McClain, today is another day looking at the police contract, and it does not give any time of healing or recovery for our family. My family and I had an opportunity to look at the case, and it is very clear Anthony had no gun. Therefore, I would like to demand to reopen up a second investigation. If you don't, I feel you are being racist to Black people, and we really need to stop this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Shea, followed by Michael Williams, followed by Karina Kay. Alan, *6 to unmute. Alan,
Hello,
there you go.
Honorable, hello, Honorable Mayor Gordo and City Council members. Once again, we come to a point where we're asking for fairness from our leaders. Again, it sounds like one of the family members has come before you to ask, to make a demand that this case be reopened.
Alan, it feels what's on the agenda is the PPOA contract, not anything.
I'm getting there.
It's labor negotiations, yeah.
Yes, labor negotiation with police departments. So again, it turns back on the issue of police and how fairness should extend to the residents of the community. Therefore, the message that the prior caller just asked to be open should be followed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Williams, followed by Karina Kay, followed by Camille Lewis, who's not in the meeting, it appears. So Janae Lennox would follow. Michael, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Everyone hear me?
Yep.
30 seconds. Yep. So again, this is interesting, just like last week, that there's a closed session item on something involving the city manager that you all are going to go into closed session and have input on. Yet you say that you can't give any input, or you can't give any or have any decision-making power on whether or not the officers who killed Anthony McClain are fired, right? But you can have input on the negotiations with your biggest, some of your biggest donors, which is the Pasadena Police Officers Association. You can have input on the negotiations with them, but can't have input or won't have input on the murder of Anthony McClain and whether or not those officers should be fired. It seems like you're playing a double standard. It seems like you are publicly lying and manipulating the public. The same way you're lying and manipulating the public about ShotSpotter. The same way you're lying and manipulating the public about Anthony McClain's case. Stop doing that. You guys are public officials. One of your job is to make sure that the city is adequately informed about what is going on here. I can see you laughing, and I don't know what you're laughing about, but Anthony McClain's murder is not a joke to me. Being killed by the police here in Pasadena is not a joke to me. Next week will be the 10th anniversary of Kendrick McDade. His murderers are still on the force. J.R. Thomas's murderers are still on the force.
Mr. Williams, your time has expired.
Mr. Williams,
So stop laughing.
if you'll bring your comments to a close.
Fire those officers.
Thank you.
Karina Kay, followed by Camille Lewis, who's not in the meeting, so it'd go to Janae Lennox, followed by Carolyn Galoni, who's not in the meeting. At least we don't see her. Karina, go ahead. 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thanks. My name is Karina. I'm a Pasadena resident and a member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. And echoing the other sentiments, you all are going into closed session with an organization that claims to have a mission for public safety. So if they have anything to do with administering services to the public, then the information that you all talk about should be made available to the public. You should be giving a public hearing like you just made everyone sit through for several hours about what is happening between the Pasadena Police Officers Association and the Pasadena City Council that refuses to hold the police officers accountable. I want you all to consider the ways that Edwin Duma-Gwendon is going to be benefited by your labor negotiations, how Ronald Serrano is going to be benefited by your labor negotiations, how all of these officers are shielded and protected by you all, but we as the public have to deal with the ramifications of that. I want you all to consider how you are protecting Pasadena's killer cops in these negotiations. And we demand that these officers are held accountable and that they are fired. So when you go into closed session, keeping all of this information secret, Cynthia, come back in here because we need you to fire Edwin Dumas-Linden and Ronald Serrano. When you go into this closed session, think about the ways that you're shielding killer cops and think about the community that it affects because they don't have anything to do with public safety. You need to be investing directly in the community and not into the police officers associations, not into the police department at all, while you let them continue a reign of terror and abuse against people.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Camille Lewis is not in the meeting. Moving on to Janae Lennox. Miss Lennox? One minute, 30 seconds. Yes, go ahead.
So just like my comrades have been speaking about, the fact that you guys are willing to have a negotiation with a entity that continues to harass and torture your communities doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't sound like you're trying to do your job. I don't ever hear you guys trying to have negotiations with the families of Anthony McLean. I don't hear you having these negotiations through the Black communities and stuff to making sure that we feel protected every single day. But you would dare to have a closed session with some entity that says that they are here for public safety. So this whole negotiating behind doors is hella shady because this should be for everyone to hear because it's part of our day-to-day life. So the fact that you guys are willing to do this behind doors lets us already know that you already know what you're doing is wrong. You want it to be secretive and hidden behind everything that you're doing so that the public does not have to bash you guys every single time, but the action didn't speak for itself. The fact that you're willing to do this behind closed doors is already enough to let us know that you guys know what you're doing is wrong. You continue to protect these killer cops every single day by not firing the officers that killed Anthony McCain, someone who was running away with no weapon in his hand. That is public safety number one. If you cannot not kill someone on your job, you should not have it, period. But you're willing to negotiate to keep these particular people safe, these people who are clearly dangerous to your constituents, the people that voted you in.
Miss Lennox, your time has expired. Carolyn Galoni? No? Okay, that completes public comment. Wait, who? Camille Lewis came in? Bring her in. Miss Lewis?
Can you hear me?
We can. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Oh my God, it is disgusting that you are negotiating with the Pasadena Police Officers Association. You have not given any justice to the family of Anthony McLean. This is absolutely wrong. How can you even be in negotiations? This is disgusting. You're doing it in a closed session. The last caller was right. This is how we all know. You know what you're doing is corrupt. You know what you're doing is wrong. You don't want the public commenting to you about the murder of Anthony McLean. This is unacceptable. No negotiations with the Police Officers Association. There needs to be justice for Anthony. You need to help the family. You need to fire the officers that murdered Anthony McLean. Stop doing this closed session stuff. You're gonna have to open the city council meetings again, and we're gonna be back. We're gonna email, we're gonna write. This is unacceptable. I've already threatened it, and I'm saying it again. We're gonna show up at your house, and if you tell us we can't go near your house, 300 feet, we'll go 300 feet before your house. What you're doing is wrong. Doing it in closed session is so shady. It just emboldens us to stay online. You're disgusting. You're trash.
Ma'am, if you'll,
Seriously,
if
you're the
you'll
worst city
focus,
council ever.
if you'll focus your comments on the agenda.
Shut up. Yeah, we're talking about item E, Police Officers Association.
Thank you. Your time has
My
expired.
God.
For the benefit of this last speaker and all of the speakers, all labor negotiations are conducted in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, state law. Thank you.
That completes public comment on the upcoming closed session. There are no more public comment speakers.
Okay, now we will recess pursuant to state law to close session.
Council members, please go to the closed session link. Thank you.